The church was silent in a way Esperanza had never heard before. Every head had turned toward the front, toward Bet, who stood frozen in her Sunday dress with tears she refused to let fall. The choir behind her stopped mid-note, and even the children in the front row went quiet. Hunter stepped forward, breath unsteady, suit jacket slightly trembling as he held Bet's hand like a lifeline he couldn't afford to lose. His voice cut through the stunned room, rich and raw with emotion no one had ever heard from him before. "I don't care about the contract," he said loudly, clearly, letting the words echo through the sanctuary. "I love my wife, and I'm not letting her leave." Gasps rippled across the pews. Some whispered his name, others simply stared. The man who once lived behind sharp lines and hard decisions was now standing in front of everyone, completely exposed. Before Bet could respond, tiny footsteps pattered down the aisle. Cassandra rushed forward, her small arms reaching up toward Hunter's with desperate urgency. "Daddy, don't let Mommy cry," she pleaded, her little voice shaking. That moment landed like lightning. No one in the room moved, some covered their mouths. A few pressed hands to their hearts. This wasn't a headline or a staged moment for cameras. This was real, too real for anyone to pretend otherwise. Hunters knelt down, lifting Cassandra gently, holding her against his chest as if she were the most precious thing in his world. That simple gesture, father and child, sent a wave of emotion through Bet so strong she nearly lost her balance. Hunters rose to his feet again, holding Cassandra on one arm, Bet's trembling hand in the other. His jaw tightened, and then, without a word, he pulled a folded contract from his pocket. It was creased, worn, and torn straight down the middle. He let the shredded paper fall to the church floor. "This paper said our marriage ends today," he said, voice breaking. "My heart says it never will." A heavy silence wrapped the room. Bet stared at the torn contract on the floor, then at the man standing before her. This man who had once spoken to her like she was part of a business plan, now fighting for her like she was oxygen. Her voice was soft, pained, full of years of guarding her heart. "Then why did you wait until I was walking out that door?" He swallowed hard. Everyone in that church leaned in. No one dared breathe. The truth was written all over Hunter's face: fear, regret, longing. The battle inside him had broken wide open in front of the entire town. And now, dear listener, this is where you come in. Have you ever made a choice you thought was simple, only to realize it carried someone's heart on the other side? Have you ever told yourself you were protecting your peace, only to discover you were pushing away the very love you wanted? If you've ever guarded yourself so tightly that you created your own heartbreak, if you've ever tried to control life only to learn the heart doesn't follow rules, this story is for you. Because what happened between Bet and Hunters didn't begin here. Not in this church, not in this moment of public truth. It started long before, with a cold CEO who believed marriage was an image, and a quiet single mother who believed love was something you nurtured, not negotiated. What brought them to this moment? What made the entire town gather in shock as their contract fell apart on the floor? How did a man who lived by logic end up fighting desperately for a woman he never meant to love? This story will change your heart. But before we dive into everything that led to this moment, welcome back to Stories by Mr. Flex, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button, because it helps us share more meaningful stories like this across YouTube. And don't forget, drop a like and comment, because your engagement pushes this story further and helps someone else hear a message they might need today. Now, let's begin at the start of Bet's world in Esperanza. Sunday mornings in Esperanza always carried a gentle kind of magic, the type that didn't shout or show off but lived quietly in the air like a familiar melody. The sun rose slowly over the flat Texas horizon, warming the brick buildings, the gas stations, the large fields, and the long roads that ran past old farms and modest homes. And as always, the people of Mount Hope Baptist Church began filing into the sanctuary, greeting one another with hugs, jokes, and heartfelt blessings. Inside, the choir robed in deep purple stood ready to lift their voices, and the ushers passed out programs with friendly smiles. At the front of the room, the stained glass windows colored the wooden pews in warm shades of amber and gold. And there, standing with graceful posture and a calm heart, was Bet. Bet had always felt at home in that sanctuary. She grew up in this very church, ran around the hallways as a little girl, and later taught Sunday school while juggling 2 jobs. Now, in her early 30s, she stood at the pulpit leading a hymn with the type of sincerity that could soften even the hardest weeks. Her voice was warm, steady, and wrapped in years of living through both joy and storms. The congregation loved her, not because she tried to be perfect, but because she didn't pretend to be. She was one of them, a woman who worked hard, prayed harder, and showed up for people even when life felt heavy. She embodied the heart of Esperanza, strong, humble, and full of faith. Down in the front pew, little Cassandra sat swinging her legs, holding her stuffed rabbit in one hand and clapping off beat with the other. Her hair was tied up in 2 tiny puffs, bouncing every time she moved. At just 3 years old, Cassandra already had a bold spark in her eyes, brown, bright, curious, and always searching for what came next. She had Bet's smile, the same dimples that deepened whenever she laughed, and she had her mother's gentle spirit. Some Sundays, Cassandra sang loud enough to make the older lady smile. Other Sundays, she hummed softly and hid behind Bet's skirt. Today she clapped proudly, looking up at her mother with admiration so pure it almost brought tears to Bet's eyes. When the choir reached the final chorus, Bet let her voice soar, and a ripple of emotion moved through the sanctuary. People closed their eyes, some nodded their heads, others simply let the moment wash over them. The song wasn't just a hymn, it was comfort, hope, and a reminder that even small towns carried big faith. As the last note faded, Bet stepped down from the pulpit, wiped a small bead of sweat from her forehead, and made her way to the front pew. Cassandra jumped into her arms, wrapping her tiny arms around her mother's neck. "You sang pretty, Mommy," Cassandra whispered. Bet smiled, pressing a kiss to Cassandra's cheek. "Thank you, baby." The pastor stepped up to the pulpit to begin the sermon, and Bet settled into her seat, holding Cassandra on her lap. She listened carefully, nodding as the pastor spoke about perseverance, about how faith often asks us to walk into unknown places with trust, not fear. Bet felt the message tug gently at her spirit in a way she couldn't explain, as if something unseen was preparing her for a shift she couldn't name yet, because truthfully, Bet's life hadn't been easy lately. Being a single mother in a small Texas town meant she carried both the load of protector and provider with very little room for resting. She worked full-time at the Esperanza Public Library, balancing story time, shelving books, and helping people fill out forms. She often stayed late to ensure the building was clean and organized for the next day. Her evenings were spent making simple meals for Cassandra, cleaning up toys, folding laundry, and checking the small stack of bills that always seemed to wait for her. But she never complained. Bet had grown used to carrying heavy loads. She had finished graduate school while taking care of a toddler, saved enough to buy a small bungalow on Willow Street, and made it her mission to raise Cassandra with love and stability. She didn't have much money, but she had enough to keep them safe, fed, and surrounded by the warmth of their community. After church, Bet gathered her things and placed Cassandra's small hand in hers. "Ready for lunch, sweetheart?" "Yes," Cassandra said with excitement. They walked down the church steps into the soft Texas sunlight. The smell of someone grilling sausage drifted from a few houses away. Cars passed slowly down Main Street, some honking and greeting as they saw familiar faces. Children ran across the churchyard, their laughter blending with the sound of cicadas. Bet planned to meet her friend LaToya at Rosa's Cafe, a local spot known for its comfort food: fried catfish, mashed potatoes, collard greens, and the best sweet tea in town. Sundays at Rosa's were always lively. Families packed into booths, elderly couples shared meals, and groups of friends caught up on life. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. When Bet and Cassandra arrived, LaToya was already waving from their usual booth near the window. LaToya was one of those friends who always kept a smile ready and an opinion on the tip of her tongue. She hugged Bet tightly, then scooped Cassandra into her arms before sliding her into a booster seat. "You sounded beautiful in church," LaToya said as the waitress brought menus. "Girl, you had Sister Diane wiping her eyes again." Bet laughed softly. "Oh, please. Sister Diane cries every Sunday." LaToya grinned. "Not like today. You had her fanning herself." Bet shook her head with embarrassment. I just sing from the heart, that's all." As they ordered lunch, Cassandra played with her stuffed rabbit, making it hop across the table. Bet smiled as she watched her daughter, playful, sweet, full of imagination. People often said Cassandra had an old soul, like she understood things deeper than her age would suggest. Once the food arrived, LaToya's voice softened. "You doing okay, Bet? You look tired." Bet sighed, picking at her mashed potatoes. "Just life, bills, work, keeping everything balanced. You know how it is." "I know," LaToya said, "but you're doing an amazing job, and you're not alone. You've got us." Bet nodded slowly. She knew she had love around her, church friends, neighbors, extended family who visited often. But even with support, the weight sometimes felt heavy. Still, she reminded herself not to dwell on the hard parts for too long. Faith had always carried her where strength alone couldn't. As they finished lunch and stepped into the afternoon light, Bet felt a familiar tug on her spirit again, a sense that something was shifting in her life, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was the pastor's sermon still echoing. Maybe it was the way Cassandra clung to her more tightly today. Or maybe it was simply the feeling that life, unpredictable as it could be, was preparing her for something new. Cassandra tugged her dress. "Mommy, can we get ice cream?" Bet smiled. "We sure can." The rest of the afternoon passed with quiet joy. A stop for ice cream, a walk in the park, then home to their cozy little bungalow, where Cassandra napped while Bet cleaned the kitchen and folded laundry. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in warm oranges and deep blues. Esperanza felt calm, safe, full of routine, but the feeling inside Bet wouldn't go away. A soft stirring, a shift in the wind, a whisper in her heart that change was near. She sat on the porch that evening, rocking gently in her chair while watching Cassandra draw chalk shapes on the sidewalk. The cicadas hummed, cars moved slowly, neighbors watered plants or waved as they passed. Bet lifted her face to the sky, breathing deeply. Something was coming. She didn't know what, but she felt it all the same. As the first stars appeared overhead, she whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, whatever it is, prepare me." The night air settled around her. Cassandra looked up from her drawing. "Mommy," she said softly, "why you look like that?" Bet smiled and opened her arms. "Come here, baby." Cassandra climbed into her lap, resting her head against her chest. Bet held her close, the center of her world, the reason she kept pushing, the reason she would face anything that came her way. Even if she didn't yet know that a stranger named Hunters was already on the road that would lead straight into their lives. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story already, hit like to help more viewers on YouTube. Find Stories by Mr. Flex. Your support means everything. The city of Houston didn't wake up gently the way Esperanza did. It rose quickly, with the sound of engines humming down wide freeways, business towers stretching toward the sky, and early risers lining up at coffee shops with tablets and laptops already in hand. The morning light reflected off the tall glass buildings downtown, and the hum of ambition pulsed through every corner of the city. In a high-rise office overlooking the skyline, Hunter Anderson stood silently with a steaming cup of dark coffee. He stared out the window like a man mentally reviewing his next dozen moves. His office was sleek, modern, furniture, dark wood accents, clean lines everywhere. Nothing in the room was out of place. He lived the way he worked, organized, sharp, efficient. Hunters was a man who had learned early in life that emotions slowed progress. His family believed in control, in discipline, in carrying oneself with quiet authority. His father, who came from generational wealth, raised him with a rigid standard. His mother was precise, elegant, and as reserved as a closed book. In their home, affection was rare, and expectations were high. Hunters grew up mastering silence, structure, and strategy. He built One-Star Petroleum the same way, strategically, relentlessly, with an eye for turning every challenge into a win. At 38, he was one of the youngest CEOs in the energy world, known for being brilliant, direct, and unshakable. Investors trusted him because he never panicked. Employees respected him because he never wasted words. The media labeled him the cold white CEO, a title he neither rejected nor embraced. He simply didn't care. But that morning, as he watched Houston begin its day, something tightened in his chest. He couldn't name it, but the pressure had been building for weeks. He turned when he heard a knock. "Come in," Hunter said without raising his voice. Amanda, his executive assistant, stepped into the room with a clipboard. Amanda had worked with him long enough to understand his routines. 1 cup of coffee at 6:30, financial reports by 7, board briefs by 8. She was one of the few people he trusted to keep his world moving smoothly. "Good morning, sir," she said. The board chairman sent an early note. Hunter's clenched his jaw slightly. "What does Ross want at this hour?" Amanda walked closer. "He said it's urgent. He wants you in the boardroom by 9. Something about public image and the upcoming conference." Hunter's exhaled through his nose. "Again." "Yes, sir. Again." Amanda hesitated. "It sounds serious this time." Hunter's placed the coffee cup on his desk and straightened his suit jacket. "Tell them I'll be there." As Amanda left, Hunter's ran a hand through his hair. The word image had been thrown at him repeatedly over the past month. One Star was doing well. Profit numbers were high. Partnerships were strong. But public opinion had shifted in recent years. Investors were looking at companies with stronger cultural representation, more family-centered leadership, and better ties to community values. Hunter's had all the business credibility, but he lacked one thing: relatability. It never bothered him before. He lived for efficiency, not feelings. But the board insisted the company needed a softer image, one that reflected the world more accurately. In their eyes, that meant Hunter's needed to stand next to someone who didn't look like him, someone warm, grounded, approachable. Before 8 o'clock, Hunter's left his office and headed down the private elevator to the boardroom on the 10th floor. Several board members were already seated around the long table, each with tablets open. Ross Edgewater, the chairman, sat at the head. He was older, sharp-eyed, and carried himself like a man who had built empires from dust. "Hunters," Ross said with a nod. "Good of you to join us." Hunters sat, interlocking his fingers. "You said it was urgent." Ross leaned forward. "It is. You know how much attention our company receives. You being the youngest CEO in the industry doesn't help. Every camera follows your moves, and every headline highlights the same thing." Hunters waited. "You're excellent at strategy, but your public image is cold," Ross continued. "Out of touch. Clinical. You represent numbers, not people." "I represent results," Hunters replied evenly. "And results need to be backed by community trust," Ross countered. "We need the right optics. The big Dallas Energy Conference is next month. Investors will be paying attention. Reporters will be everywhere. They're expecting to see a more relatable side of One Star." "Meaning what exactly?" Ross's eyes sharpened. "Meaning you need a partner." Hunters didn't flinch, though internally he recoiled at the intrusion. "A partner?" he repeated. "A wife, Hunters," Ross said plainly. "A woman, preferably someone who reflects a broader demographic. Someone intelligent, someone warm, someone that makes you appear grounded. Marriage is still the quickest way to shift public perception." The other board members nodded. Hunters leaned back in his chair. "And you expect me to marry for the sake of a press release? It won't be real marriage," Ross said quickly. "Just a year-long arrangement, a contract. After that, you can separate quietly." Hunters tightened his fist. "And you think this is ethical?" "It's strategic," Ross replied. "And you're good at strategy." Hunter's eyes drifted to the window overlooking Houston's skyline. A wife. For image, for a conference, for the board. He hated the idea. But he also understood the board's expectations. He knew how quickly a CEO could be replaced when he didn't play the game the way investors wanted. He exhaled slowly. "So you want a contract arrangement?" Ross nodded. "Find someone suitable. Make sure it looks genuine, and get it done before Dallas." Hunters didn't respond right away. His mind was calculating, analyzing, weighing every angle. A contract marriage, a year in the spotlight, a controlled ending, clean, strategic, manageable. It wasn't love he resisted. He simply didn't believe in it. Not for him, not with his upbringing, not with his life. He only needed someone who understood stability, someone practical, someone not impressed by power or money, someone who could stand next to him without pretending. After the meeting ended, Hunters returned to his office and requested files from Human Resources. Not for employees. He wanted profiles of women connected to community programs, educational networks, small outreach organizations, and cultural groups. He wasn't looking for romance. He was looking for compatibility. One resume stopped him cold. Bet Parker, Esperanza Public Library, community volunteer, single mother, master's degree in education, warm references from local leaders, photograph attached, soft smile, kind eyes, poised demeanor. She wasn't from Houston. She wasn't from corporate circles. She was everything the board wanted, everything he didn't know he needed. Hunters tapped her resume thoughtfully. He could almost picture her life, calm, rooted, connected. She wasn't looking for a CEO or a contract. She was raising her daughter with the consistency and love he had never known himself. He didn't need a woman chasing power. He needed someone stable, someone who balanced his cold logic with quiet strength. That night, Hunter sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the city lights. His penthouse was spotless, elegant, and breathtaking, but painfully silent. He felt the isolation in his bones, a wife for a year, a public image transformation, a controlled partnership with a defined ending. It didn't have to be messy, just business. He stood up, walked to his desk, and pulled Bet's resume forward again. A life far different from his skyscraper world, but maybe that was the point. He whispered to himself, Esperanza, a place he had never been, but one he would soon drive to with a plan that would change the lives of 3 people forever. The morning sun in Houston had barely risen when Hunters packed the last of his folders into a black briefcase. He moved around his penthouse with his usual precision, checking each detail twice, locking cabinets, making sure every document he needed for the day was inside that case. But today wasn't like his usual days. Today wasn't about meetings or numbers or investors. Today was a mission, one he had decided on with a calm mind but an uneasy heart. He walked toward the large windows overlooking the skyline. The sky was soft blue, stretched wide with morning light. Traffic flowed below like a steady current of energy and responsibility. He had lived in this city for years, but it never truly felt like home. It was familiar, efficient and competitive, everything he was, but not everything he needed. He checked the time. He needed to be on the road. After triple-checking his briefcase, Hunters stood by the entrance, slipped on his gray coat, and grabbed his keys. The elevator whisked him downward to the underground garage, where a rental SUV waited, larger than his usual sleek cars, but necessary for the drive ahead. He climbed in, adjusted the mirrors, and pulled onto the road. His assistant had already mapped out the route, Houston to Esperanza, about 2 hours of open road, quiet towns, and peaceful landscapes he rarely saw in his world of skyscrapers and fluorescent lights. As the city faded behind him, the landscape changed quickly. The freeway gave way to wide stretches of land sprinkled with old barns, ranch houses, and tall oak trees. Fields stretched for miles. He passed roadside vendors selling fresh fruit and honey, the occasional horse ranch, and a few small gas stations with signs that looked like they hadn't been updated in years. It was different, calm, almost too calm. Hunters wasn't used to silence. His life was a constant stream of conference calls, messages, and decisions. But today, all he had was the hum of the engine and the soft voice of the GPS guiding him forward. He thought about Bet as he drove. Her resume had stood out not for glamour but for sincerity, community service, literacy programs, work with local families, and a degree she earned while raising a young child. He had no idea who she truly was beyond those pages, but something about her steadiness called to him. He wasn't going to Esperanza looking for a wife. He was looking for the right person to stand beside him in a controlled partnership. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the spotlight, someone who wouldn't crumble under pressure, and someone who could bring a warmth the board wanted. Bet seemed to fit that expectation perfectly, or so he hoped. The sun was halfway up the sky when Hunters entered Esperanza. It was a small town marked by quiet streets, bright murals on buildings, narrow sidewalks, and wide open skies. There was a single grocery store, a barber shop, a diner with the best burgers in Texas sign, and a small cluster of brick homes on Willow Street. The town had charm, simple, honest, and real. Hunters slowed down as he turned onto Beatty Street. Willow trees lined the sidewalks, their branches swaying lightly in the breeze. Kids rode bikes, a couple of neighbors chatted over fences, and someone walked a dog down the sidewalk. He spotted Bet's bungalow, small but full of character, with a porch swing and neatly trimmed bushes. A small pink tricycle lay tipped over near the front steps. He felt a strange tightness in his chest at the sight of it. It was a glimpse into her world, one that was far removed from the polished steel and glass of his. He parked at the curb, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment. He wasn't nervous. He didn't believe in nerves, but he felt something close to unfamiliar. A slight flutter, a question. Would she even listen to him? He stepped out of the SUV, smoothed his shirt, straightened his tie, and walked toward the porch. A warm scent floated from somewhere nearby, maybe someone baking, or maybe the smell of coffee in morning air. He knocked twice, firm but respectful. The door opened slowly. Bette appeared, her eyes soft with curiosity but cautious. She had on a comfortable dress and her hair was pulled back neatly. She wasn't wearing makeup, yet she looked composed and naturally beautiful. Her presence was calm, grounded, almost soothing. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle but guarded. Hunters offered a small nod. "Good morning, Bette. I'm Hunters Anderson." Bette blinked. The name clicked. She remembered seeing it on the resume folder he sent 2 days ago. The CEO, the man whose assistant contacted her, the one she assumed was trying to recruit her for some literacy initiative or community partnership. Not this. Before she could speak, a small head poked out from behind her leg. Cassandra, wearing tiny pajamas with cartoon stars, peeked up at the tall stranger on the porch. Her eyes were big, curious, and slightly nervous. Bette placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's okay, baby. Stay right here." Hunter softened his stance instinctively. He wasn't great with children. He rarely encountered them, but something about the small girl watching him with wide eyes made him lower his voice slightly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "Morning," Hunter said. "I was hoping we could talk." Bette hesitated. She didn't invite strangers into her home often. And this wasn't just any stranger. This was the CEO from another world entirely. She wasn't sure what he wanted, why he was here, or why he had driven all this way, but something in his demeanor, calm, respectful, earnest, kept her from turning him away. "Come in," she said quietly. Hunter stepped inside. The living room was warm and homey, bookshelves filled with children's books and paperbacks, small toys neatly arranged in a corner, a framed photo of Bette holding baby Cassandra. The space felt lived in, loved, real. Bette gestured to the couch. "Have a seat." Hunter sat down, carefully placing his briefcase by his feet. Cassandra climbed onto Bette's lap, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly. Her big brown eyes stared at Hunter's like she was trying to figure out whether he was friendly or not. Bette folded her hands. "So, what brings you here?" Hunters exhaled, choosing his words with precision. He didn't like sounding unsure, so he spoke with his usual directness. "I'm here because I have an offer for you, one that I understand might sound unusual." Bette lifted an eyebrow slightly. "Unusual how?" Hunters opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the coffee table. "I'm under significant pressure from my company's board. They want to shift the public image of our leadership before the Dallas conference next month. They believe I need a partner, a wife." Bette stilled, every movement freezing like she had been turned to stone. "A wife?" she repeated slowly. "Yes," Hunter said evenly. "A temporary arrangement, 1 year, a legal marriage with very clear boundaries and an agreed timeline. You would live with me, attend public events with me, and present as a family for the sake of company optics." Bette stared at him, stunned. The audacity, the bluntness, the shock. Her voice dropped. "You want me to marry you for business?" Hunters nodded, keeping his tone level. "It's not a traditional marriage. You would be compensated generously. A salary, a home, medical benefits, long-term support for Cassandra, and financial security for the year." Bette swallowed hard. This was far beyond anything she expected. She had imagined job offers, maybe community partnerships, but not a contract marriage. Cassandra pressed her face into Bette's shoulder, sensing her mother's tension. Bette tightened her arms around her daughter. "This is a lot, Mr. Anderson. A whole lot." "I know," Hunters replied softly. "No, I don't think you do." Bette took a breath. "I have a child. I have a life here. I'm not someone you can just slot into a business plan. I don't expect this to be easy for you," Hunters said. "But I believe you would be the right person for this partnership." "Why me?" Bette asked sharply. "Because you're stable," Hunters replied simply. "You're respected in your community. You're calm. You're intelligent. You're a good mother. And—" He paused, glancing at Cassandra. You have a presence that balances mine. Bet didn't know how to respond to that. Her heart was pounding. This was too much, too fast. She wasn't sure whether to laugh, cry, or question why she was still listening. She didn't doubt that Hunters was telling the truth. He seemed too straightforward to lie. But the offer felt unreal, almost uncomfortable in its bluntness. You're asking me to uproot my entire life, she said quietly. Yes, he admitted, and pretend to love you. No, Hunter said firmly. You don't have to pretend anything emotional, just partnership, stability, an arrangement. Bet looked down at Cassandra, who was now fiddling nervously with her rabbit's ear. She stood with her daughter in her arms and walked to the window, staring out at the street where Cassandra often played. Her mind swirled. Money would make life easier. Stability would help her daughter. But a marriage, even a fake one, wasn't something she ever thought she'd consider. I need time, Bet whispered. Hunters rose slowly from the couch. Take all the time you need. I'll be in town until tomorrow. He placed his card on the coffee table and picked up his briefcase. Bet didn't turn around. I'll think about it. Hunters nodded once, quietly. I understand. As he reached the door, Cassandra finally peeked at him again, her small voice barely above a whisper. Bye. Hunters paused, softened by her innocence. Goodbye, Cassandra. He stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. Bet held her daughter close, heart racing, breath uneven. The offer sat on the table like a question she wasn't ready to answer. But one thing was certain. Nothing in her quiet life would ever be the same again. The night after Hunters left her house, Bet didn't sleep. She tried. She laid in bed with the lights off, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the soft breaths of Cassandra curled beside her, but her mind kept circling back to that offer. It wasn't like she hadn't faced big decisions before. Life had thrown her plenty, finishing graduate school while juggling diapers, buying a home with no partner to lean on, working long hours at the library while raising a child. She was used to choosing the hard thing when it meant protecting her daughter. But this was different. This wasn't just hard. It was unreal. She stared at the ceiling, one arm behind her head, the other draped protectively across Cassandra's small back. The air felt heavy with uncertainty, as if the night itself held its breath waiting for her next move. At around 3 a.m, Bet quietly slipped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. She poured a glass of cold water and sat at the small wooden table, the same place where she'd paid bills, braided Cassandra's hair, written out grocery lists, and cried silently over the weight she carried alone. The contract folder Hunters left still sat in the center. She hadn't opened it again. She already knew that if she opened it, she would have to face the reality of what it meant. She rubbed her forehead. Lord, what am I supposed to do? She whispered. She didn't expect an answer, but sometimes speaking her fears out loud made them less intimidating. Around sunrise, Bet stepped onto her porch. The air was crisp, calm, and full of the quiet sounds of Esperanza waking up. Cars starting in far driveways, birds searching the grass for breakfast, neighbors watering plants before the heat settled in. She sat on the porch swing, letting it rock slowly. Bet? A familiar voice called. She turned and saw her Aunt Lorraine walking toward the house. Lorraine lived down the street and had a habit of checking on BET whenever something felt off. She always knew. Today was no different. You up early, Lorraine said, leaning against the railing. Didn't see your lights go off last night. Bet exhaled and rubbed her arms. I couldn't sleep. What's going on? You look like you're carrying the whole town on your shoulders. Bet hesitated, unsure how much to say. But if there was anyone she trusted besides God, it was Aunt Lorraine. Someone came to see me yesterday, Bet began slowly. A man? Lorraine asked immediately, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, Bet sighed. Hunters Anderson, the CEO from Houston. Lorraine pulled a chair closer and sat. What'd he want with you? Bet looked down at her hands. He has an offer for me. What kind of offer? A job? Bet shook her head. A marriage. Lorraine froze. Come again? A marriage, Bet repeated, voice low. A contract marriage. For his company's image. Lorraine took a long breath. Lord have mercy. It's for 1 year, Bet explained. He'd pay me well. Give Cassandra stability. Help with everything we need. But it's still a marriage. Lorraine reached over and took Bet's hand gently. How do you feel about it? Bet didn't answer at first. She stared out at the morning sky. pink streaks blending into soft orange. "I feel torn," she said finally. "It's crazy, I know that. And yet, a part of me wonders if this is a door God is opening. Not for love, not that, but for stability. For Cassandra." Lorraine nodded slowly. "You always think about your baby first. That's the thing," Bet whispered. "I've worked so hard to give her everything I can. But sometimes I worry it's not enough. I worry she deserves more stability than I can give alone. And you think this man can give it?" "I don't know," Bet admitted. "He seems honest, direct, cold, yes, but not unkind. I don't feel scared of him. I don't feel like he'd hurt us." Lorraine leaned back. "Let me tell you something, Bet. Life doesn't always give us perfect choices. Sometimes we're handed two hard choices, and we gotta pick the one that'll give the most long-term peace." Bet looked down at the porch floor. "I just don't want to make a mistake." "You pray on it," Lorraine said firmly. "Let your heart settle. You'll know." Bet nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. Lorraine squeezed her hand again before standing. "Whatever you choose, I'm behind you," her aunt said. After Lorraine left, Bet decided to do exactly what she always did when she didn't know the next step. She prayed. She stepped inside, closed the living room door behind her, and knelt on her carpet. She took a deep breath, folded her hands, and closed her eyes. "God, it's me," she whispered. "I don't know what to do. I don't want to choose out of fear. I don't want to choose out of desperation. I want to make the right choice for my baby. If this is something you want for us, show me. If it's not, close the door. Please." Her voice cracked, but she didn't wipe her tears away. She let them fall. "Lead me," she said softly. When she finished praying, she felt a strange calm wash over her. Not a full answer. She wasn't expecting one, but a stillness. She stood and returned to the kitchen where Cassandra was now awake, sitting in her high chair with her stuffed rabbit. "Mommy," Cassandra said sleepily, "I hungry." "I know, baby," Bet said, kissing the top of her head. "Let's get breakfast." As she cooked eggs and warmed tortillas, she felt clarity beginning to form. She looked at her daughter, at the sweet face she would do anything for. And in that moment she knew. She didn't need a voice from the sky. She didn't need a sign. She needed to choose the path that gave her daughter stability, even if it scared her. They finished breakfast together before Bet sent a text to Hunters. "Come by the house when you're ready. I have my answer." It didn't take him long. Within the hour, Hunter's SUV pulled up outside. He stepped onto the porch with the same calm expression he always carried, though Bet noticed the faintest bit of tension around his eyes. "Good morning," he said. "Morning," Bet responded, opening the door wider. "Come inside." Cassandra peeked shyly from behind Bet's leg as Hunters entered. He nodded to her gently. She held her rabbit tightly but didn't hide this time. Bet gestured toward the living room and they sat, Bet holding her daughter close, Hunter sitting straight-backed, waiting. "I thought a lot about your offer," Bet began slowly. "I prayed, I talked to my aunt, and I kept thinking about what's best for Cassandra." Hunters nodded. "I understand." Bet took a breath. "I'll do it. I'll marry you." Hunters exhaled relief flickering across his face for the first time. He nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I promise I'll handle everything professionally." Bet lifted a hand lightly. "But let's be clear, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for her." She looked down at her daughter. "She deserves stability. She deserves security." Hunters nodded again. "And I'll honor that." They spent the next hour going through the terms. Bet insisted on a few changes. She wanted the right to keep her job at the library part-time. She wanted joint decision-making for Cassandra's daily routines. She wanted clear boundaries, no public displays of emotion unless necessary. She wanted a trust fund set aside for her daughter that no one could touch. Hunters agreed to all of it without hesitation. His practicality served him well. He didn't try to negotiate down or counter her requests. He knew she was protecting her child, and he respected that. Later that afternoon, they walked together to the backyard beneath the oak tree. Its branches stretched wide, offering shade and a quiet type of dignity the moment needed. The papers were laid out on the small patio table. There was no fancy ceremony, no photographer, no crowd, Just two people choosing a path neither expected. Bet signed first, her hands steady but her heart pounding. Then Hunter's. Their signatures sat side by side, marking the start of something they didn't yet have words for. When they drove to the courthouse, Cassandra came along, sitting quietly in her car seat with her rabbit. Bet wore a simple white dress she had in her closet. Hunter's changed into a crisp black suit. They stood before a justice of the peace who didn't ask questions, just filed the paperwork and congratulated them. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't emotional, but it was real. As they stepped out into the afternoon light, Bet felt a warm breeze lift the edge of her dress. She looked at Hunter's, the man she had married not for love, not for romance, but for survival, and for a brief moment, she felt something unexpected. Softness. A flicker. Not love. Not yet. But a beginning she hadn't anticipated. Hunter's extended a hand to help her step down. His touch was firm, steady. "Thank you, Bet," he said quietly. "I won't let you down." She nodded gently. "I hope not." As they walked back to the SUV, Cassandra tugged on Hunter's hand for the first time. "Mommy married you?" she asked in her small voice. Hunter's glanced at Bet, then crouched beside the little girl. "Yes," he said softly. "We're a team now." Bet felt her heart shift in her chest. A small shift, a tiny opening. Something new had begun, something neither of them had planned. The day Bet moved into Hunter's home began quietly, almost too quietly. It wasn't the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the kind that sat in her chest like a held breath, a quiet that made her hyper-aware of every step she took, every thought she had, every worry she tried to push aside. The marriage certificate had barely cooled from the courthouse printer, and already her life was shifting. Her little bungalow on Willow Street, her safe haven, was now a place she would visit, not a place she would live. The morning sunlight spilled across her living room as she packed the last of Cassandra's toys into a tote bag. Her daughter watched from the couch, hugging her stuffed rabbit, blinking sleepily. She didn't understand everything that was happening, but children rarely miss the emotional undercurrent of life. She sensed change. "Mommy, are we leaving our house forever?" she asked, head tilted. Bet knelt in front of her, brushing curly strands from her forehead. "Not forever, baby. We'll come back and visit. All your things are coming with us. You're not losing anything." Except routine, Bet thought silently. Except familiarity. Cassandra nodded and went back to tracing circles on the couch cushion with her fingertip. Bet stood up, pressing a hand to her own chest, steadying her breath. This was the right decision. She made it for her daughter's sake. That had always been her anchor. She carried the last box to the porch. Hunter's waited outside beside his SUV, the back door already open. He stood straight as always, hands loosely folded, expression neutral but focused. He watched her approach carefully, as if trying not to crowd her. "I can take that," he said, stepping forward. "It's okay," Bet replied gently. "It's not heavy." He nodded and stepped back slightly, letting her place the box inside. Cassandra trotted onto the porch behind her mother and hesitated before stepping down the stairs. Hunter's knelt to her level, his voice softer than Bet had ever heard. "Ready to go?" he asked. Cassandra hugged her rabbit closer and gave a small nod. She didn't take his hand, but she didn't hide behind Bet either. Progress, Bet thought. They climbed into the SUV, Bet in the passenger seat, Cassandra in the back. As they pulled away from Willow Street, Bet looked back at the house she'd worked so hard to buy. She remembered every bill she'd paid alone, every late night studying in that kitchen, every moment rocking her daughter on the porch swing when life felt too overwhelming. It wasn't just a house, it was proof she had survived. She blinked away the sting in her eyes and turned forward. Hunter's drove through Esperanza with his usual calm. He glanced at Bet occasionally, studying her expression. "If at any point you want to stop by your home, let me know," he said. "Nothing changes there. It's yours." Bet appreciated the reassurance. "Thank you." They reached Hunter's home just outside the city, a large two-story house with white walls, a dark roof, and oak trees on either side of the lawn. To Bet, it looked like something from a world she had only seen on TV. Elegant, structured, clean lines everywhere. "Wow," she murmured under her breath. Hunter stepped out and opened the back door for Cassandra. The little girl looked up at the house, her eyes wide. "Is this our new home?" "For now," Bet said softly. Inside, the house was spacious, but not extravagant. It felt carefully curated. Minimalist furniture, muted colors, polished floors. Everything had a place, and everything was in it. There were no toys scattered across the living room, no family photos, no signs that anyone lived there emotionally, just physically. Bet felt the difference immediately. This was a house, not a home. "We can adjust anything you need," Hunter said as Bet looked around. "New furniture, room changes, anything to make you both comfortable." Bet nodded. "Thank you." Hunter showed them upstairs. "This will be your room," he said, opening a large door that revealed a bedroom with soft lighting and a neatly made bed. "And the room next to yours is for Cassandra. I had someone bring in new bedding for her." Cassandra stepped inside her room first. A pink comforter covered the bed, decorated with small stars. A white rug lay on the floor, soft under her feet. Her eyes lit up as she ran her hand across the mattress. "It's pretty," she said, bouncing once before she remembered to look at her mother. Bet smiled. "It is, baby." Hunters watched the small exchange with a look Bet hadn't yet learned to read. Not affection exactly, maybe curiosity, maybe unfamiliar warmth. Bet set Cassandra's bag on the bed, unpacking toys and arranging them in a small corner. She let her daughter explore while Hunter stood by the doorway, hands in his pockets. "If anything doesn't feel right," he said, "tell me." "I will," Bet replied. After settling into the rooms, they went downstairs to the kitchen. It was sleek and modern, marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, spotless floors. It looked more like a model kitchen than one that had ever cooked a full meal. Bet touched one of the cabinets, noticing how tightly everything was arranged. "You really don't cook, do you?" Hunter shook his head once. "Not well," Bet chuckled, her first laugh since the courthouse. "Well, lucky for you, we eat real food. Cassandra doesn't survive on protein bars." Hunters blinked. "She shouldn't," Bet smirked. "Exactly." She checked the fridge, neatly, stacked containers, mostly prepared meals from upscale grocery stores. Bet pushed her sleeves up. "I'll need to go grocery shopping. I can have everything delivered today," Hunters offered. Bet turned to him slowly. "Hunters, I'm talking about seasoning, spices, real food." He paused, then nodded. "I'll get whatever you need." As they talked, Hunter's assistant texted him repeatedly. Bet watched him check his phone, tap responses, and exhale sharply. The CEO world didn't pause just because his personal life had taken a drastic turn. The cultural differences showed quickly. Bet moved around the kitchen with ease, placing things where she wanted them. Hunters watched, with a mixture of confusion and acceptance. He didn't interfere, he didn't dictate, he simply stepped aside when she needed space. In the afternoon, a couple of BET's church friends stopped by unannounced, curious after seeing a moving truck in front of Hunter's home. When Bet opened the door, Tiffany and Elaine gasped dramatically. "Bet! Girl, you moved in already?" Tiffany blurted. Bet gave a tight smile. "It's complicated, but yes." Elaine peeked behind her, spotting Hunters in the living room adjusting the thermostat. "Oh, so that's him?" Bet fought the urge to rub her temples. "Please don't start." Tiffany grinned. "We not starting nothing, we just observing." Quietly, Hunter turned, saw Bet's friends, and approached politely. "Good afternoon." Tiffany straightened like she was standing before a judge. Good afternoon, sir." Elaine elbowed her. "Be cool," Bet sighed. "Y'all can come back another day, please." They left with mischievous smiles but no judgment. Bet knew the ladies would call her later, wanting every detail. Later that evening, Bet cooked dinner, macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, and sautéed green beans. Hunters sat at the dining table, watching her work with careful attention. "I've never seen someone use that many seasonings at once," he admitted. "Because you've never tasted good food," Bet replied lightly. Hunters raised an eyebrow, almost amused. Cassandra sat beside Bet, humming while placing her fork precisely the way her mother taught her. Hunters watched the child, watched her small hands, her gentle demeanor, the way she leaned into her mother's arm when scared by a loud pot lid slamming shut. Bet served them, and Hunters took his first bite. His eyes widened slightly. "This is very good," he said. Bet tried not to smile too proudly. "Thank you." After dinner, Hunters insisted on washing the dishes. Bet raised an eyebrow. "You sure? I can do this," he said. Bet watched him scrub dishes with the same focus he used in business meetings. He looked awkward but determined. The sight made an unexpected softness bloom in her chest. Later that night, Bet tucked Cassandra into her new bed. The little girl grabbed Bet's hand. "Mommy, is this really our new house?" Bet smoothed her daughter's hair. "Yes, baby, but I'm right here, and Daddy's here too." Cassandra smiled faintly at the word Daddy. She wasn't calling him that yet, not truly. But the idea didn't scare her. Bet kissed her forehead and walked into the hallway. She found Hunter standing near the railing, looking down at the living room with his hands in his pockets. "She's settled?" he asked. "Yes," Bet replied softly. "She'll adjust." He nodded. "So will we." Bet leaned on the railing too, glancing at him. "Hunters, this isn't going to be easy. And you have your world," Bet added. "Your board, your pressure." Hunters looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "And now I have this," he said quietly. "This house. You, Cassandra, will make it work." Bet didn't respond immediately, but something inside her chest shifted. Not love, but possibility. They stood there in the quiet hallway, two strangers tied together by paper, but beginning to sense that something real, something human, was forming under the surface. And neither of them knew it yet. But this was the very beginning of what would later become the most unexpected chapter of their lives. The first full week in Hunter's home came with more adjustments than Bet expected. She had prepared herself for new walls, new routines, and new responsibilities, but she hadn't prepared herself for how quickly little moments would begin to stitch themselves into a daily life she never imagined sharing with a man she barely knew. On Monday morning, Bet awoke before sunrise. She moved quietly through the hallway, careful not to disturb Cassandra or Hunters. She made her way downstairs and slipped into the kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal on the stove. The house was silent. No business calls, no hurried footsteps, no hum of activity, just the simmering oatmeal and the calm before the day began. She was slicing strawberries when she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Hunter standing in the doorway, wearing a simple t-shirt and gray joggers. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. She had never seen him without a suit, without a button-down shirt, without layers of corporate armor. He looked human, softened, almost warm. "You're up early," he said quietly, stepping in. "So are you," Bet replied. "I have a meeting in an hour," he explained, though his voice didn't sound as crisp as usual. "But I wanted to check if you needed anything." Bet shook her head. "We're okay." Hunters hesitated, then moved beside her. "Can I help with anything?" Bet raised an eyebrow. "Can you cook?" "No," he answered honestly. She laughed softly. "Then I will help you help me." He watched closely as she handed him the strawberries. "Just slice those. Thin pieces. No rushing." He held the knife like it was a foreign object. "Like this?" "No," Bet said gently, reaching to adjust his hand. Her fingers brushed his, and the contact startled both of them. She pulled back quickly. "Angle your hand this way." Hunters obeyed, cutting carefully. The slices were uneven, some too thick, others too thin, but the effort mattered more than the outcome. "You know," Bet said, glancing at him, "you don't have to help every morning." Hunters didn't look up. "I want to try." Those words lingered in the air long after breakfast was served. When Cassandra came downstairs, rubbing her eyes, Hunters greeted her with a soft good morning, and she climbed into her chair. Bet placed a small bowl in front of her. Hunters placed a cup of apple juice beside it. Cassandra looked up, surprised. "You made juice?" she asked. "I poured it," he corrected. She giggled and took a sip. Hunters softened visibly. Bet watched the interaction with quiet curiosity. She had never seen him around children, never imagined him capable of adapting to their world. Yet here he was, pouring juice, slicing fruit, waking early to try. As Hunters left for work, Cassandra waved from the doorway. "Bye." He paused before walking to his SUV. "Goodbye, Cassandra." Bet noticed the faint, involuntary smile he gave the little girl. It wasn't something he planned. It was something that slipped through his control. Throughout the week, the house filled with domestic rhythms Bet hadn't expected to share with him. On Tuesday afternoon, Bet cooked chicken and rice while Cassandra colored at the table. Hunters arrived home earlier than usual, loosening his tie as he walked in. "Something smells good," he observed. Bet handed him a spoon. "Taste." He tried it. His eyebrows lifted. "That's amazing," Bet chuckled softly. "Seasoning, Hunters. That's all it is." He watched her stir the pot, her movements fluid and confident. She was at home in a way he had never been, even in his own kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Go ahead. How do you stay so calm? You take care of a child, cook, handle a job, and still have the strength to teach me how to make breakfast without rolling your eyes at me." Bet leaned on the counter. "Because somebody needs to be calm, and because I've learned that life doesn't slow down just because we want it to." Hunter studied her, as if seeing another layer he hadn't noticed before. "I admire that," he said simply. Bet wasn't expecting that. Her breath caught, but she didn't respond. After dinner, Hunters washed dishes again, sleeves rolled up, water splashing occasionally onto the counter. Cassandra giggled each time he accidentally splashed himself. "You find this funny?" he asked the little girl, raising an eyebrow. Cassandra nodded vigorously, her rabbit tucked under her arm. "Yes." He shook his head, pretending to be stern. "I'll get better." Bet's lips curled into a genuine smile. He didn't have to try so hard, but he did. Midweek brought a new challenge bedtime. Cassandra didn't want to sleep in her new room. Despite the pink comforter and soft rug, she felt uneasy. "Mommy, stay with me," she whispered. Bet sat on the edge of the bed, humming softly. Hunters walked past the doorway and paused. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "She's adjusting," Bet explained. Hunters stepped into the room cautiously. "Cassandra, do you want me to read a story?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Bet handed him a picture book. Hunters sat on the carpet, his back against the bed frame, reading in his steady, even voice. Cassandra relaxed. Bet watched with surprise as her daughter inched closer, eventually resting a hand on Hunter's arm. He looked down but didn't move. Bet felt something stir in her chest, something warm and unfamiliar. After the story, Hunters stood to leave. Cassandra held onto his sleeve. "Stay," she whispered. Hunters froze. He looked at Bet for direction. Bet swallowed. "Just a few minutes," she said softly. He sat back down. Bet watched him through the doorway, listening to him hum quietly, off-key but gentle. Cassandra's eyes drifted shut. When Hunters finally stepped into the hallway, Bet whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied, but he had wanted to. On Thursday, the church community held an evening gathering. Bet didn't plan to bring Hunters. She assumed he'd be buried in work or uninterested, but he surprised her. "I'd like to come," he said that afternoon as he loosened his tie. "If you don't mind." Bet blinked. "You want to?" "It's part of our agreement to appear as a family," he said plainly, but something in his voice hinted it wasn't just about the contract. Bet dressed Cassandra in a cute denim dress while she wore a simple outfit that still felt nice. Hunters appeared in the hallway wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. Not his CEO uniform, something softer, more approachable. "You clean up nice," Bet said before she could stop herself. Hunters glanced at her, the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes. "Thank you." At the church pavilion, laughter and music filled the air. Children ran around with glow sticks, older folks chatted near the grill, and teens played football on the grass. The moment Bet stepped inside, friends approached her. "Bet, you brought him. Hunters, welcome. Sir, can you play quarterback for the kids?" Bet cringed slightly, expecting Hunters to panic, but he didn't. He rolled up his sleeves, handed Bet his watch, and walked onto the field. Bet stood near the picnic tables watching him. Hunters, cold, structured, boardroom-polished Hunters, stood in the grass with the football in his hand as a group of kids yelled directions at him. "Throw it to me." "No, me. I'm open." Hunters lifted the ball and threw it. The throw was clean, powerful, and perfect. The kids screamed. Bet covered her mouth to hide her laughter. Cassandra cheered loudly, shouting, "Go, Daddy." Hunters froze briefly at the word. Bet froze too. But the moment passed. He continued playing. Later, as they walked back to the car, Cassandra holding both of their hands, Bet whispered, "Thank you for coming." "You're welcome," Hunters replied quietly. "It was different good?" Bet asked. He paused. "Yes, Friday morning brought the moment that changed everything. Bet was in the kitchen folding clean towels when she dropped one on the floor. Hunters bent to pick it up at the same time she did. Their hands brushed, same moment, same movement. She looked up. He looked down. For the first time, their eyes didn't just meet. They held, just for a beat, then another, then another. It was fleeting, subtle, but undeniably there. A spark. Something that wasn't in the contract, wasn't in the plan, wasn't in the words they signed under the oak tree. Something fragile, unspoken, and deeply human. Bet pulled her hand back, clearing her throat. "Thank you." Hunter straightened slowly. "You're welcome." He watched her walk away, his expression unreadable but changed. Later that night, Bet tucked Cassandra into bed and stepped into the hallway. Hunter stood by the railing again, just like before. But this time, his gaze dropped from the window to her. Soft, still, curious. He wasn't looking at her like someone examining a business partner. He was looking at her like a man trying not to feel something he didn't expect. That was the moment Bet realized. Something had shifted. Something real had begun, and neither of them knew how to stop it. The night was warm and still, the kind of Texas night where the sky stretched endlessly overhead and the breeze carried the faint scent of grass and distant barbecue smoke. After a long day filled with small domestic rhythms, Hunters coming home early, Bet cooking dinner, Cassandra drawing stick figures on refrigerator paper, they all seemed to drift into their own corners of the house. Cassandra fell asleep quickly, clutching her rabbit, and Bet lingered by her daughter's door, watching the little chest rise and fall. When Bet finally stepped into the hallway, she heard footsteps downstairs. She hesitated before walking toward them. Something in her chest tugged, subtle but persistent. Hunter stood on the back porch, hands in his pockets, staring out past the yard. The porch light cast a soft glow over him, revealing the tension in his jaw and the way he exhaled slowly, as if wrestling with something he couldn't explain. Bet pushed the sliding door open quietly and stepped outside. "You couldn't sleep either." Hunters turned, surprised but not startled. "No, too much on my mind." Bet leaned against the railing beside him. The moonlight brushed gently across her skin, softening her features. They stood side by side for a moment, saying nothing, letting the silence settle. Bet rested her arms on the railing. "You've been quiet all evening." Hunters took a slow breath. "I've been thinking." "About work?" Bet asked, expecting his usual response. "No," he said softly, "not work." Bet turned slightly, her expression shifting. "What then?" He didn't answer immediately. He stared out at the backyard, at the faint outline of the swing set he'd had installed 2 days ago for Cassandra, at the fence lined with trees, at the shadows stretching across the grass. Finally, he said, "About us." Bet froze. The words hit her straight in the chest, unexpected, unsettling, impossible to ignore. "Us," she echoed. "Yes." His voice dropped lower, almost hesitant. "You, me, and Cassandra." Bet looked away quickly, her heart thudding. She hadn't prepared for this. She hadn't rehearsed what to do if he ever approached the line between contract and emotion. "Hunters," she began cautiously. "What's going on?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a rare gesture from a man so tightly controlled. "I didn't plan for things to feel different," he said. "I told myself this arrangement would stay clean, simple, professional." Bet swallowed hard. "It was supposed to." "I know," he said, "but I think something is changing. For me." Bet's breath caught. Her fingers curled around the railing, gripping it for balance. She wanted to speak, but her mind scrambled, trying to process what he meant, what he could possibly feel. Hunters kept his eyes on the yard, as if the ground itself made it easier to speak. "When I see you working in the kitchen, when I see how gently you raise her, when I see the warmth you bring into this house." His voice thinned slightly. "It feels different. I'm not used to different." Bet felt her pulse quicken. A knot tightened in her chest, pulling tight enough to ache. This wasn't part of the contract. They weren't supposed to blur boundaries. She had promised herself she would protect her heart. "Hunters," she whispered, not trusting her voice. He turned to her then. Really turned. His eyes were steady, unshielded, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I don't know what this means," he admitted. but I know it's there." Bet's heartbeat thundered. Her face warmed, her palms damp. She wanted to breathe, to think, but everything inside her felt scrambled. "Hunters, we can't—" She didn't finish because the sliding door behind them opened suddenly. Cassandra stumbled out, rubbing her eyes, her rabbit hanging from her hand by the ear. She looked between them groggily. "Mommy," she whispered. "Daddy." The words slipped out like a soft breeze, unplanned, pure, innocent. Hunters froze. Bet froze harder. Cassandra blinked at Hunters again. "Daddy, pick me up." Bet's breath left her body like someone punched it out. It wasn't the first time Cassandra had said the word. She had used it at the church event. But this moment was different. This moment wasn't playful. It wasn't mimicry. It was want. Hunters stared at the child, stunned. Something shifted in his expression, a softness so deep Bet had never seen it on his face before. He crouched down slowly, almost uncertainly, holding his arms out. Cassandra walked straight into them. Hunters lifted her gently, her small arms wrapping around his neck. She rested her head on his shoulder, sighing with trust, with comfort. Bet pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. She didn't know whether to cry or run or tell Cassandra to go back to bed. Seeing Hunters hold her daughter, really hold her, did something dangerous to Bet's chest. Hunters carried Cassandra back inside while Bet followed silently. He tucked her into bed, smoothing her hair with a tenderness that looked foreign on him. When he stepped into the hallway, Bet stood there, arms crossed tightly, trying to brace herself. He spoke first. "I didn't expect that," he admitted. Bet forced a swallow. "She's confused," she said. "Everything is new. She's trying to understand this arrangement." Hunters nodded slowly. "I know." Bet took a step forward. "But we have to be careful. She can't get attached to something that's not real." Hunter's eyes softened. "But it feels real to her." Bet's voice wavered. "And that's exactly why we need to draw lines." Hunter shook his head gently. "Bet, you don't have to pretend this house isn't changing things." Her breath caught again. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Don't make this harder than it already is. I'm not trying to make anything harder." He insisted quietly. "I'm trying to be honest." "Well, honesty is dangerous right now." Bet backed up, shaking slightly. "We have a contract, we have boundaries, and whatever you think you're feeling, you can't act on it." Hunter stepped closer. "Why?" "Because this wasn't supposed to be emotional," she snapped softly, her voice breaking. "This wasn't supposed to involve hearts." He paused, breathing deeply. "Maybe we don't get to control everything." Bet's eyes flashed. "I have to control this. For her." She pointed toward Cassandra. "True. She can't be caught in the middle of something we don't understand." Hunters lowered his gaze. A silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I didn't mean to confuse you." Bet wrapped her arms around herself. Too late. Hunter stepped back, a slow retreat that mirrored her emotional one. "I'll give you space," he said. "Good night, Bet." "Good night," she whispered, though the word felt broken in her throat. He walked down the hallway and disappeared into his room. Bet stood alone, trembling, fighting tears she didn't want to let fall. She didn't know if she was angry, scared, or overwhelmed by the truth she was trying to outrun. She stepped into her room and closed the door quietly, fingers trembling on the doorknob. Once the door clicked shut, the tears came, silent, heavy, uncontrollable. Because part of her had felt it too. Part of her wanted to lean into the change. Part of her was terrified of what would happen if she didn't. The next morning brought tension sharp enough to slice through the air. Hunter stayed in his office. Bet stayed in the kitchen. They avoided eye contact, stayed in opposite corners of the house, moved around each other with silent restraint. Neither knew the other was lying awake half the night replaying the same moment. The breathless confession on the porch, the tremor in Bet's voice, the way she said "too late," and worst of all, the way Cassandra had said "daddy," the word neither of them could unhear. Bet went through her day in quiet turmoil. Hunters went through his in equal conflict. There were emotions rising in corners of their hearts that neither could confront without risking everything. Contract, stability, safety, expectations. Yet the truth hovered between them, unspoken. Their contract was changing, whether they wanted it to or not. And for the first time since this arrangement began, both of them feared what would happen next. The silence in the Anderson household the next morning didn't feel like peace. It felt like a held breath, sharp, fragile, stretched too thin. Bet moved quietly through the kitchen, pouring juice for Cassandra, smoothing the little girl's braids, tying the shoelaces on her tiny sneakers. She spoke softly to her daughter, but inside she felt like her chest had turned into a tight knot. Hunters walked in a few minutes later. He wasn't wearing his usual calm mask. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between tired, restless, and distracted. He gave Bet a brief nod, then crouched beside Cassandra. "Morning," he said. Cassandra hugged her rabbit and tilted her head. "Daddy, are you okay?" Bet froze. Hunter stiffened. He answered carefully, "I'm fine." But he wasn't. Bet could hear it in his voice. Something in him had cracked the night before, and neither of them had figured out how to patch it. Breakfast passed in strained silence. Every clink of the fork sounded too loud. Every sigh echoed through the room. When Hunters finished eating, he stood up, grabbed his jacket, and paused. "Bet," he said. She didn't look up. "Yes? We'll talk later." Her throat tightened. "About what?" Hunters hesitated. "Last night," Bet's hand tightened around her coffee mug. "There's nothing to talk about," she said quietly. Hunter's jaw flexed. He didn't push, he just nodded and left. The door shut softly, but it felt like the whole house shook. Later that day, Bet was shelving new children's books at the library when her phone buzzed repeatedly. She ignored it at first. The last thing she wanted was more complications. But the buzzing didn't stop. Finally, she checked it. Dozens of messages, most from church friends, some from co-workers, some from neighbors. Every notification had the same theme. "Bet, is everything okay? Turn on the news. Girl, the chairman from One Star is talking about your marriage." "Why is he saying that?" Her heart hammered as she opened the live news clip. There on the screen stood Ross Edgewater, the board chairman, the man who had pushed Hunters into a diversity marriage in the first place. He stood behind a podium at the Energy Leadership Luncheon in Dallas, surrounded by cameras and reporters. The reporter's caption read, "One Star's CEO expected to end contract marriage next month." Bet's stomach dropped. Ross smiled that polished billionaire smile as he spoke. "Hunters Anderson has fulfilled the board's request beautifully. The marriage arrangement was always meant to be temporary, strictly professional. We appreciate Mrs. Anderson's participation. The arrangement will conclude soon, and Mr. Anderson will resume his single status." Bet's breath left her body. Every word felt like a slap. Her hands shook violently around her phone. The world blurred. She gripped the shelf beside her to stay upright. Temporary, arrangement, resume single status, strictly professional. Everything she feared, everything she worried about, everything she tried to protect her daughter from. It was coming true on live television. Announced like a business update. Announced without her consent. Announced without Hunters even warning her. She ended her shift early, barely hearing her supervisor's questions. She grabbed Cassandra from daycare, drove home in silence, and walked into the house with her emotions burning through her chest. Hunter's SUV was already parked out front. Bet's heartbeat pounded in her ears as she stepped inside. Hunter stood at the kitchen counter, papers scattered, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed as if he'd been pulling at it in frustration. He looked up the moment she walked in and froze. He knew she'd seen it. Her eyes were full, not with tears but with fire. "Bet, no," she snapped. "Not today, not after that." He stepped toward her. "I didn't know he was going to say that. I had no idea." Bet's voice shook with rage. "He said we're ending the marriage. He said it publicly. He said I was part of an arrangement. Do you know how humiliating that is?" "I'm not supporting what he said," Hunters insisted. "I didn't approve that speech. I didn't even see it until it aired." Bet threw her bag onto the dining chair. "You knew this was a contract. You knew there was a timeline. But you told me last night that something was changing. Then this press announcement? You let him talk about me like I'm a prop." Hunters flinched. "I'm trying to fix it." "You're too late," Bet said, tears threatening her voice. "You can't undo the fact that the world thinks I was just a business tool. My daughter's mother is now a headline." Hunters ran a hand through his hair. "Bet, please. I swear I didn't know." Bet took a shaky breath. Do you understand how this looks? People are already talking. My friends texted me. The church is talking. The daycare teachers asked what was happening. Hunter stepped closer. Let me explain. No, Bet said again. You don't get to explain right now. You don't get to stand there and ask me to calm down. I'm not asking you to calm down, Hunter said, voice low. I'm asking you to trust me. Bet laughed bitterly. Trust? How? When the whole world just learned my marriage is a corporate stunt? Hunter's face tightened. You know that's not how I see it anymore, do I? Bet asked sharply. Because right now, all I see is the CEO who signed a paper to use me for optics and never told his board that the terms had changed. Hunter stepped toward her again. The terms changed last night. You know that. Bet's heart punched against her ribs. And what? I'm supposed to pretend that matters when your chairman just told the world we're breaking up. He stared at her, hurt flashing behind his eyes. Bet, he said quietly, please don't walk away. Cassandra wandered into the kitchen then, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, she said, sensing the tension. Daddy, why you sad? Hunter's inhaled sharply. Bet nearly broke, not in anger, in heartbreak. Cassandra's innocent question cut through everything. Hunter's crouched beside her, forcing a smile he barely held together. I'm okay, he whispered. Bet watched him, this cold CEO trying to hold himself steady in front of a child who was beginning to love him. Her stomach twisted painfully. We need space, she said, voice trembling. Hunter stood slowly. Bet, she shook her head. I can't talk about this, not right now. I can't stand in this kitchen pretending everything's fine when my life just became a headline. Hunter's reached for her arm, then stopped himself. If you walk away right now, we won't fix anything. Bet's eyes filled. Maybe there's nothing to fix. His face broke. Bet grabbed a small bag, walking to her room. She packed fast, Cassandra's pajamas, toothbrush, a few clothes. Hunter's followed her to the hallway doorway, his voice cracking. Bet, don't do this. I can't stay here tonight, she whispered. Not after that announcement. Hunter's voice rose for the first time, not in anger but in fear. Running won't solve this. Bet turned sharply. This isn't running, this is breathing. She zipped the bag and lifted Cassandra onto her hip. Her daughter looked between them, confused and anxious. Hunter swallowed hard. Bet, please. Bet shifted away from him. I'm going to my aunt's house. I need space. I need to think clearly without this house clouding everything. The sentence hit Hunter's like a blow. He shook his head slowly as if trying to keep the world from spinning. Please don't go, he whispered. Bet's voice broke completely. You told me last night something was changing. And today the world told me nothing changed at all. Hunter's closed his eyes in pain. Bet stepped past him, walked down the hall and headed toward the front door. Hunter's followed slowly, stopping at the threshold. She looked back once. His face was devastated, rare, raw, stripped of control. Bet turned away and stepped out, the door clicking shut behind her. The silence afterward was suffocating. Hunter stood alone in the living room, staring at the space where Bet had stood seconds before. The house felt colder, emptier, wrong. For the first time in his life, the cold CEO felt fear, not of losing a deal, not of disappointing a board, but of losing the only family he had ever started to love. And this time, he didn't know if he could fix it. Not with money, not with power, not with logic, because this wasn't business, this was his heart. And he had no idea how to hold on to it. Hunter's barely slept. He sat at the edge of the bed long after Bet left with Cassandra, staring at the wall, replaying every second of the conversation. The sound of the door closing behind her kept echoing through his mind, louder than any board decision, louder than any quarterly loss, louder than anything he'd ever faced. He had never felt powerless, until now. By sunrise, he was dressed in a tailored suit, tie perfectly knotted, shoulders stiff with a purpose he had never carried before. He wasn't heading to work. He was heading straight to war. Ross Edgewater's press announcement had crossed a line. Hunter stepped into his SUV, pulled out of the driveway, and drove toward One Star's headquarters in Houston, with a kind of focus that frightened even him. He didn't put music on. He didn't stop for coffee. He didn't check his emails. He was done trying to manage this quietly. He was done letting a room full of men decide his life. He was done letting fear dictate anything. The building's glass doors slid open as Hunters marched through the lobby, his footsteps sharp against the polished floor. Employees hurried out of the way, whispering as he passed. He ignored all of them. He took the elevator to the top floor. The doors opened, and Hunters strode down the hallway straight toward the chairman's office. 2 assistants jumped up from their desks. "Mr. Anderson, he's in a meeting." Hunters didn't slow. "Good," he said. "I want an audience." Before they could stop him, he pushed open the double doors and stepped inside. Ross Edgewater sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by other board members. They turned, startled, as Hunters entered. Some straightened uncomfortably. Some stiffened visibly. But Ross only smiled. "Well," Ross said smoothly, "I assume you've seen this morning's coverage." Hunters closed the door behind him, his expression cold and controlled. "I did." Ross gestured toward an empty seat. "Take a moment to breathe, son. Let's discuss plans moving forward." Hunters didn't sit. "There is no plan moving forward. Not your plan." The room went silent. Ross's smile strained. "Hunters, I understand you're emotional. Stop." Hunter's voice dropped low. "You don't get to frame this as emotion. You announced the end of my marriage without my consent." Ross leaned back. "It was never a real marriage. You knew that from the start, and it's time to return to normal operations. You met your obligation." Hunter slammed his hand down on the table. A few board members flinched. "Do not," he said slowly, "ever refer to my wife as an obligation again." Ross blinked. "Your wife?" "Hunters, let's not pretend I'm not pretending." Hunters stepped closer. "Last night something changed, and what you did today put her dignity on public display like it was a marketing line." Ross lifted a brow. "Are you telling me she matters to you?" Hunters stared at him with a gaze he had never used before. Not the gaze of a careful CEO, but the gaze of a man who finally understood what mattered. "Yes," Hunters said, "she matters." A murmur swept across the room. Ross snorted. "Feelings change nothing. The arrangement is ending. The board expects—" "I don't care what the board expects," Hunters cut in. "I'm not divorcing her." Ross laughed softly, as though humoring a child. "You don't get to change the agreement now. The press already knows. Investors have seen the headlines. The timeline is set." Hunter straightened his spine. "Then change it." Ross's smile vanished entirely. "You're out of line." "No," Hunter said, voice steadier than steel. "I'm finally in line with what I want." Ross pushed back from the table. "Hunters, your job is built on stability, predictability. You cannot show the world you fell in love with someone from a town like Esperanza. That destroys your image." Hunters felt something final click inside him. "That image," he said, "is exactly what I'm done living for." Ross's jaw clenched. "You are not thinking clearly." Hunters leaned forward. "I have never thought clearer. I want my marriage. I want Bet. I want the family we've started to build. And for the first time in my life, I don't care how it looks." Silence hung thick in the room. Ross looked him up and down. "If you walk this path, you risk everything." Hunters didn't blink, then let it risk. The older man exhaled, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "Fine. If you're choosing her over the company, I'm choosing honesty," Hunters said, "something this board hasn't used in years." Ross's face reddened. "This is reckless." "No," Hunters said, "it's real." But the door opened before he reached it. The entire board stared, but Hunters only saw her. Bet swallowed. "I didn't mean to interrupt." His voice shook for the first time that morning. "Bet, what are you doing here?" She stepped inside, her feet small against the large room. "I came to drop off your tablet. You left it at home." Hunter's heart twisted. She shouldn't have been here. Not in this room full of suits who didn't understand the first thing about her warmth, her strength, her worth. Ross's voice cut through the moment. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, too politely, "we didn't expect your presence." Beth stiffened. "Apparently I didn't expect yours either." Ross blinked. The board members exchanged glances. Beth turned to Hunters. "I heard everything." Hunters froze. "Everything. I was in the hallway," she whispered. "I heard you say you weren't divorcing me. I heard you say you cared." Her voice wavered. The whole room faded. Hunters took a step toward her. "Bet," he whispered. "Last night I wasn't confused. I wasn't mistaken. What I said on the porch wasn't temporary. I meant it. She blinked, chest trembling. I'm scared, Hunters. I know, he said. I am too. I don't want to be a mistake, she whispered. You're the only thing that's made my life feel anything but a mistake, he said. Her eyes filled. Ross groaned. This is getting ridiculous. Bette lifted her chin, turning toward him. Ridiculous is announcing the end of a marriage that isn't your business. Ross stiffened. Mrs. Anderson, your marriage is part of a contract. Bette stepped closer to Hunters instead, cutting him off. Do you really mean it? She whispered. All of it. Hunters cupped her face subtly, gentleness blooming in his voice, every word. Bette let out a shaky breath. Because I can't keep stepping toward you if you're going to let this company pull you away from us. Then I'll stop letting them, Hunters said. Ross slammed a file on the table. Hunters, this decision affects more than your household. Hunters didn't even turn. My household is the only place that affects me now. Bette's hand covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Hunters reached for her hand, pulling her inches closer. I'm done hiding, he said. Done pretending. Done bending to this board, Bette whispered. What happens to the company? Hunters looked into her eyes. Let it figure itself out, he said. I choose you. The words left him like an oath. Bette's breath broke. She stepped fully into him then, her forehead resting on his chest as the board watched in stunned disbelief. Hunters wrapped one arm around her protectively, the other hand resting against her back. Ross scoffed. So this is it then? You're willing to jeopardize your entire future for... Hunters lifted his head sharply. Not jeopardize, he said firmly. Protect. Ross stood. This is a terrible decision. Hunters gave him a long, steady look. The only terrible decisions I've made were the ones where I ignored my heart. He took Bette's hand. Let's go, he whispered. She nodded and followed him out. As the door closed behind them, the boardroom erupted in whispers. Ross stood rigid, shocked that the man he shaped, trained, and controlled for years had walked out on him. But Hunters didn't hear any of it, because Bette was holding his hand, and for the first time, she wasn't pulling away. In the hallway, Bette stopped him. Hunters. He turned, chest still tight with adrenaline. Yes? She took a breath, voice trembling. I didn't come here to fight with you. I didn't come here to beg you to fix anything either. I know. I came because... She hesitated. Because when I left last night it hurt more than it should have. Hunter stepped closer, heart thudding. Bette. She clutched his jacket. I don't want this to be a contract anymore. Something inside him cracked completely. He cupped her face. Then it won't be. She closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the truth she'd been avoiding. When she opened them, her voice was barely audible. I'm trusting you, Hunters. Don't make me regret it. I won't, he said. Not again. They stayed there in the hallway. Two people who weren't supposed to fall in love. Two people who signed papers instead, exchanging vows. Two people who were finally choosing each other. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that choice, raw, shaky, real, became the moment everything changed. And this time, both of them were stepping into it together. The sun rose gently over Esperanza, painting the roofs with soft gold and warming the dew resting on the oak leaves in Bette and Hunter's backyard. A breeze carried the faint smell of pecan wood from someone's early morning smoker down the street. Saturday mornings in this small Texas town always felt like a blessing, but today was heavier, brighter, and somehow electric. Today was the day they'd chosen, together, to tell the community the truth. Hunter stood in front of the bedroom mirror, his tie undone, his sleeves rolled up, and his breath uneven. The memory of the confrontation in Ross Edgewater's office still pulsed through him. His voice had not shaken. His conviction hadn't weakened. He had said the words he never expected to say in his entire life. I love my wife. And he meant every syllable. Bette watched him from the doorway, holding a small brush as she finished smoothing Cassandra's hair. Her daughter sat on the little stool beside the dresser, kicking her legs and humming something cheerful, completely oblivious to the weight of the day. Bette's eyes moved between her daughter's sweet innocence and Hunter's quiet tension. You're thinking too hard again, Bette said softly. Hunter's blinked as if he hadn't realized he was staring so intently at his own reflection. Am I? You are. You always get that look when your mind is running in 15 directions. He turned to her, and there was that softness again. Not the kind that came from pity or uncertainty, but a real, grounded tenderness that had grown in slow, unexpected ways. "Do you think they'll accept it?" he asked. Bet crossed the room and put the brush down. "Hunters, Esperanza might gossip, but they don't judge the way your board does. They'll hear it from us, not from rumors, and they'll see it. They've already been seeing it." He swallowed, stepping closer. "And you? Are you sure about standing in front of everyone like this?" Her chest rose with a slow breath. "I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't sure." He gently took her hand, and she let him. They stood like that for a moment, quiet, steady, honest. Cassandra clapped from the stool. "Mommy, Daddy holding hands," she giggled. Bet froze. Hunters blinked. The tension broke into shy, stunned warmth. Bet crouched and lifted Cassandra into her arms, kissing her cheek. "You ready for the barbecue?" "Yes, I want to show Miss Rosa my dress." Hunter smiled at the little girl's excitement, and then turned to straighten his shirt. "Let's head out. People will start arriving soon." By early afternoon, the backyard was full. The grill hissed with brisket and chicken wings, and an array of folding tables held foil pans filled with mac and cheese, potato salad, cornbread, sweet tea, and peach cobbler. Esperanza had a way of bringing the whole town together over food, laughter, and stories, and today was no exception. Church members waved as they entered the gate. Mr. Jacobs, the choir director, brought his famous sausage links. Miss Carolyn from the usher board brought sweet tea so potent it could wake a sleeping giant. Toddlers ran around chasing bubbles, while older folks settled into lawn chairs under the shade of the oak branches. Bet moved through the crowd, greeting people with a confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. She wore a soft sage-green sundress, simple yet beautiful. Hunter stayed close, shaking hands, offering polite nods, and trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Everyone noticed their closeness. Everyone noticed the ease between them. The contract was nowhere in sight. This was something different, something real. Cassandra zoomed around with her tiny veil, Bet's old one, pinned on like a dramatic train. "I'm a bride," she declared repeatedly. Pastor Judith laughed. "This child is ready for a wedding before y'all even announce anything." Bet blushed lightly. "Pastor, please don't start something before I do." Pastor Judith winked. "God's timing is already working. Just don't be surprised when people say they knew before you did." Hunters heard part of that comment and cleared his throat as he adjusted the microphone clip to a small speaker by the grill. "Bet," he whispered. "It's time." Bet exhaled slowly. "Let's do it." Hunter stepped onto the small wooden platform near the back porch. Conversation softened. The sizzle of the grill faded. A hush fell over the gathering as Hunters cleared his throat, adjusting the microphone. "Good afternoon," he began, sounding unusually humble. "Thank you all for joining us today. We wanted to share something important with you, something personal." Bet joined him, standing by his side. Cassandra ran up and clung to Bet's leg, peeking at the crowd from behind the folds of her dress. Hunters glanced around at the familiar faces, people Bet loved, people he was slowly learning to admire. He swallowed hard. "I know some of you heard bits and pieces about how Bet and I got married, and I know the story hasn't always made sense." He paused. "That's because I wasn't honest. Not with this town, not with Bet, and not with myself." Bet looked up at him, her heart pounding gently. Hunters continued. "When I met Bet, my life was built on control, on strategy, on doing what made sense to others. I made a decision based on pressure, and I never meant for it to become something real. But it did. A ripple went through the crowd. I realized I care about this woman, deeply, and I care about her daughter. I love them." His voice cracked on that last sentence, but he pushed through. "I'm not perfect. I made mistakes, but I'm here to fix them." Bet felt her throat tighten. She looked out at the crowd, seeing nods, soft smiles, emotional approval. Hunters lifted a hand and gestured toward Bet. "I asked her to marry me once for the wrong reason. Now I want to say this in front of every person who matters in Esperanza." Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned toward Bet, took her hand, and lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps swept through the backyard. Even the grill master froze. Cassandra stared wide-eyed, then squealed, "Mommy, Daddy going down." Hunters looked up at Bet. "Bet, Will you marry me for real? For love?" The quiet that followed was heavier than air. Bet felt her heart expand and crack at the same time. Tears welled in her eyes, not from confusion or fear, but from recognition. This was the moment she had never dared to dream of. She covered her mouth with her free hand, nodding as emotion shook her voice. "Yes, yes, Hunters, I will." Applause erupted, boisterous, genuine, joyful. People hugged, shouted praise, and wiped tears. Pastor Judith clapped so hard her bracelets jingled. Cassandra ran forward, wrapping her arms around her parents' legs. "Mommy said yes. Mommy said yes." Hunters laughed, lifting her into his arms. Bet reached for both of them, pulling them close. In that moment, they were not a contract, not an arrangement, not a headline. They were family. Miss Rosa wiped tears from her cheeks. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "I told y'all no man looks at a woman like that unless he's already gone in the heart." Mr. Jacobs added, "This is the real deal. I seen weddings start cold and end warm, but never one that warmed up this slow and steady." Teenagers near the grill filmed on their phones, secretly but not subtly, whispering, "This is going viral." Hunters greeted each person who approached, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, learning to smile without stiffness. One woman asked, "Hunters, what made you change?" He looked at Baker across the yard before answering, "Love has a way of putting life in its proper order." Later in the evening, as the sun settled behind the oak trees, casting long ribbons of gold across the grass, Bet and Hunters stepped aside near the porch. Bet whispered, "You didn't have to kneel." He smiled. "I did. I needed you to see it wasn't business." Bet brushed her fingertips across his jaw. "I believe you." The world softened around them, music, chatter, laughter, and Hunters cupped her face gently. "May I?" he asked. Bet nodded once, her eyes warm and open. Their kiss was soft, slow, intentional, not rushed like the courthouse formality months earlier. This one carried truth, the choice to stay, the choice to care, the choice to start anew. Applause flared behind them. Cassandra shouted, "Mommy and Daddy kissing! Again!" People laughed. Bet flushed, but Hunters held her closer. Tonight was the beginning of something new, something real, something steady, something earned, something that would carry them into the next chapter of their lives. The morning after the barbecue felt like the start of a new season in B.H.'s life. Not a symbolic shift, but a real one, something she sensed the moment she opened her eyes. Her room, once a place of caution and hesitation, now hummed with quiet hope. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, brushing warm lines across the bed and making the room glow soft and bright. Cassandra had crept into their room sometime before dawn, and was curled between Bet and Hunters, her small hand draped across Hunter's chest. The sight made Bet's heart swell. The little girl was sleeping soundly, her curls spread across the pillow, her tiny breath rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Hunters was also awake, staring at the ceiling with a look Bet couldn't quite decipher, soft, contemplative, grateful. She whispered, "You didn't sleep?" He turned his head toward her, his voice low. "I slept, but I woke up early. I didn't want to miss this." Bet raised an eyebrow gently. "Miss what?" "This," he said, gesturing slightly toward Cassandra and then at her. "Waking up with my family." The sincerity in his voice pulled something deep inside her. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just steady, a man finally letting himself feel the simplest joys without fear. Bet smiled, brushing a curl from Cassandra's face. "She's attached to you, you know," Hunters whispered. "I'm attached to her, too." That truth hung in the air for a moment, before Bet slid out of bed carefully to start breakfast. Not long after, she heard small footsteps follow her, then heavier ones. The house smelled of cinnamon toast and scrambled eggs, a combination Bet had perfected for busy mornings. Cassandra climbed into her booster seat, waving a plastic spoon like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mommy, Daddy's making the milk," she announced proudly. Hunter set a small cup of warm milk in front of her, careful not to spill. He took his own seat, watching Bet as she plated the food. It was simple, domestic, unforced. For the first time since their marriage began, breakfast didn't feel like two strangers sharing a table, but a home starting to breathe in one rhythm. Hunters reached for Bet's hand briefly under the table. She didn't pull away. At church the next day, whispers floated everywhere, not malicious, but excited. That proposal was beautiful. I knew they were meant for each other. Hunters looked so nervous up there. Bet deserves this happiness. Children tugged on Cassandra's dress, calling her princess bride. Cassandra spun around proudly, showing off her old veil once again. Pastor Judith approached Bet after service, her eyes warm and knowing. "How are you feeling?" Bet exhaled, surprisingly calm and hopeful. Pastor Judith nodded. "Hope is God opening the heart to new possibilities. Don't fight it." Hunter stood nearby with a group of men from the church discussing the barbecue and trying to keep up with the local jokes. He wasn't stiff, wasn't withdrawn. He was trying and people could see it. Later, while walking out to the church parking lot, Hunter's touched Bet's hand lightly. "I'm starting to like your world," he said with a soft chuckle. "It's ours now," she replied. That afternoon, Bet sat at the kitchen table with a worn notebook and a cup of sweet tea. The first page held the words, "Our real wedding." Hunters joined her with a pen tucked behind his car, looking both prepared and slightly overwhelmed. "Okay," Bet said, tapping the pen against the paper. "We need to pick a date." Hunters leaned forward. "When do you want it?" Bet shrugged gently. "Soon enough that it feels real, but not rushed." He nodded. "What about the oak tree, where we signed the contract, where I asked you the first time for the wrong reason, and the second time for the right one?" Bet smiled at that. "The oak tree is perfect." They wrote down ideas. Outdoor ceremony under the oak. Choir singing Bet's favorite hymn. Cassandra as the flower girl. Pastor Judith officiating. Reception with soul food and barbecue. Hunters added a small detail quietly. "And I want to dance with you." Bet glanced up, surprised. "You? Dance?" He chuckled. "I can learn." She laughed softly. "Then we'll practice. Maybe not in front of people, though." He slid his hand across the table and covered hers. "Bet, I want this wedding to show the world what's real between us." Her voice softened. "I do too." 2 evenings later, Hunters found himself sitting in the men's fellowship meeting for the first time. It wasn't a formal setting, just a group of men in the church annex sharing tea, talking about life and cracking jokes. Deacon Mitchell patted Hunter's back. "I heard about that proposal, young man. Took guts." Hunters rubbed the back of his neck. "Honestly, I didn't think about it. It just felt necessary." The men nodded approvingly. "You look nervous as a man at his fiancée's family reunion," one joked. Hunters laughed, for real, something he hadn't done with men outside the boardroom in years. Meanwhile, Bet joined the women in the adjacent room. They immediately surrounded her, asking for details. "What did he say? Did you know he was going to propose?" "Bet girl, the way you two hugged afterward." Bet answered each question humbly, still overwhelmed by the attention. "It felt right," she said softly. "It felt honest." One woman smiled at her. "Good, because you deserve a man who sees you fully." Hunters peeked in for a moment, catching Bet's eye. She gave him a smile across the room. He returned it before getting dragged back by the men for another story. He no longer felt out of place here. He belonged, and he knew it. During the same week, Bet attended her first major company event with Hunters, an internal leadership dinner in Houston. Bet wore a soft blue dress that complemented her skin perfectly, and Hunters walked beside her with quiet pride. At the entrance, executives greeted her warmly. Some were surprised, some were intrigued, all respectful. One woman whispered to Bet, "You're bringing balance to him. We've never seen him this grounded." Hunters overheard, glanced at Bet and squeezed her hand. The dinner was elegant but intimidating. Bet learned quickly which board members were rigid, which ones were flexible, who watched Hunters closely, and who respected him without question. She also saw how grueling leadership could be. Hunters fielded questions, concerns, ideas, all while maintaining grace. During dessert, he leaned toward her and whispered, "Ready to go home?" Bet smiled, relieved. "Very." On the long drive back to Esperanza, Hunters reached for her hand across the console. She laced her fingers with his without hesitation. Bet realized then, she wasn't just marrying a man, she was joining his world, and he was joining hers. Midweek, they found themselves sitting on the porch again, the same place where Hunters had first hinted at his feelings. Crickets chirped around them, and the smell of evening grass filled the air. Cassandra was inside, coloring at the kitchen table. Bet leaned into her chair, sipping tea. "Do you remember the night you told me your feelings were changing?" Hunters nodded slowly. "I remember everything about that night." Bet's voice was quiet. "I was scared." "So was I," he admitted. She turned to him. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Hunters exhaled. "Because I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't want to push you, and I didn't want you to think this was part of the contract." Bet smiled faintly. "And now?" He looked at her like she was the only thing in his line of sight. "Now I want to tell you everything. I want to build this with you. I want to love you the way you deserve." Bet's heart tightened in her chest. "Hunters," he reached out and brushed his hand across hers. "I'm not asking for anything rushed. Just time. Just honesty. Just us." She nodded. "You have that." 2 nights later, after Cassandra had fallen asleep, Hunters walked Bet to the backyard. The moon was high, and the oak tree cast a familiar silhouette. Bet frowned gently. "Hunters, what are we doing out here?" He took her hands. "I asked you in front of the town because I wanted them to know the truth." He pulled her closer, his voice low and steady. "But now I want to ask you again just for us." Bet's breath caught. Hunters whispered, "Bet, will you marry me? Not for the town, not for the contract, not even for the story, but because I want to grow old with you." Her eyes filled again, but this time there was no confusion, only certainty. "Yes, Hunters," she whispered. "Yes." He kissed her forehead gently, resting his against hers. The breeze rustled the branches above them like a quiet blessing. They held each other beside the oak tree, 2 hearts no longer trying to hide, 2 hearts merging into one steady rhythm. Tomorrow they would begin, planning every detail. Tonight, they simply held each other under the Texas sky. The morning of the wedding dawned with a calmness that wrapped itself around the entire Anderson home. It was early, barely 6, and the sky outside held a pale lavender hue, the soft promise of a day that would mark a turning point in 3 lives forever. Bet lay awake before the alarm, staring at the ceiling, her heart steady but full. Today wasn't the courthouse day with a paper signing and no vows. Today wasn't about a contract or an image, or a man trying to meet the demands of a boardroom. Today was hers. Today was theirs. Today, under the same oak tree where fear once lived, they would build something real. Cassandra burst through the bedroom door without knocking, dressed in her flower girl dress even though Bet had told her 10 times that morning preparations hadn't started yet. "Mommy! Mommy! The sun is almost up!" she shouted, hopping excitedly. "Is it time? Is it wedding time?" Bet sat up, laughing softly. "Sweetheart, you're up early." "I'm ready. I'm ready right now." Cassandra spun in a circle, her dress puffing and bouncing. "I want to throw the flowers." Hunters appeared behind her, rubbing his eyes and yawning. "She's been up since 5, he said with a tired smile. "She said she needed to practice walking down the aisle." Cassandra nodded vigorously. "I'm going to walk and sprinkle and smile." Bet lifted her daughter onto the bed. "We'll get you ready soon, baby. But first, breakfast. We've got a long day ahead." Hunters leaned against the doorframe watching the 2 of them, a warmth spreading across his chest. He had never imagined himself here. Never imagined waking up in a home full of laughter. Never imagined feeling this connected to anyone. But the sight of Bet holding Cassandra, both in their morning softness, filled him with gratitude he didn't know how to name. "Let's get the day started," Hunters said, stretching. "We've got a wedding to prepare for." By 7, the house was filled with the scents of cinnamon, butter, and fresh biscuits baking in the oven. Bet wanted everyone to start the day with comfort, the same way her grandmother had done before big events. While the biscuits baked, she sat at the kitchen table as her friend LaToya helped twist her hair into a smooth, elegant updo. LaToya had arrived early with her makeup kit and a bright smile. "You ready for this?" LaToya asked, pinning a small pearl hairpiece in place. Bet inhaled deeply. "I am." "You look calm," LaToya noted. Bet smiled. "Because this time, I know what I'm walking into." LaToya paused, squeezing her shoulder. "And you deserve every bit of joy coming your way." Meanwhile, Hunter stood in the living room adjusting his suit repeatedly. The navy blue jacket fit perfectly, but he kept tugging at the collar, pressing the cuffs, smoothing invisible wrinkles. He wasn't anxious. He was overwhelmed. Every time he looked in the mirror, he remembered how far he'd come. Bet found him moments later, stepping into the room with soft makeup and hair pinned beautifully. Her robe was still tied around her waist, but she already looked like a bride. Hunter stared, his breath catching. Bet, you look... She raised an eyebrow, teasing. I'm not even dressed yet. Doesn't matter, he said quietly. You're stunning. Bet blushed, brushing his shoulder gently. Save those words for the vows. He nodded, trying not to look too emotional. The backyard had been transformed overnight with the help of neighbors, church members, and co-workers who'd volunteered their time. White chairs lined the grassy lawn in neat rows. A wooden arch wrapped in soft draping fabric stood under the oak tree, with strings of tiny lights woven between the branches. The air smelled faintly of wildflowers from the bouquets placed on each aisle seat. A long white runner extended from the porch to the tree, anchored at the end with mason jars filled with floating candles. The oak tree, their oak tree, stood tall and strong, its branches lifting overhead like a guardian. Pastor Judith arrived early, reviewing her notes. The choir warmed up quietly near the side gate, their gentle harmonies floating through the yard. By 10, guests began arriving. Cars lined Willow Street, and laughter filled the air. Miss Carolyn carried sweet tea jugs and patted Bet's arm lovingly. Mr. Jacobs fussed with the speaker system. Children tugged on their parents' clothes, asking when the bride would come out. Esperanza showed up, not out of curiosity, but out of love. Inside the house, Bet finally stepped into her simple but elegant white gown, a flowing dress with soft lace across the bodice and a skirt that brushed the floor gracefully. She looked in the mirror, feeling a rush of emotion. She wasn't just dressing up. She was taking a step into a life she once never dared to imagine. When she walked into the living room, Cassandra gasped so loudly everyone turned. "Mommy, you look like an angel," she whispered, eyes wide. Bet knelt to her daughter's height, smoothing the front of Cassandra's dress. "And you look like the prettiest flower girl in all of Texas." Cassandra threw her arms around Bet's neck. "Mommy, I love you." Bet held her tightly. "I love you too, baby." Hunters watched the moment with a hand pressed against his chest, overwhelmed to the point he had to look away for a second. When Cassandra let go, she tugged on his pant leg. "Daddy," she said, "is Mommy gonna walk to you under the tree?" He bent down, scooping her into his arms. "She is. Are you gonna cry?" He laughed, embarrassed. "Maybe." Cassandra nodded in approval. "Good. Crying means love." Bet and Latoya burst into laughter while Hunters flushed, kissing the little girl's head. The choir's voices rose softly as the ceremony began, humming Bet's favorite hymn. The guests settled into their seats. The breeze was gentle, carrying the soft rustle of leaves overhead. Sunlight flickered through the branches, like a blessing draped across the lawn. Hunters walked to the front, standing beneath the oak tree. His breath caught as he looked down the aisle. He had stood here once before, but that time fear clenched his heart. Today, all he felt was certainty. The music shifted. Everyone stood. Bet stepped onto the porch. Hunter's breath stopped. She walked slowly, each step graceful, each movement steady. The dress flowed behind her like quiet water, the sunlight catching in her hair. Her eyes were locked on him alone. Cassandra followed behind her, tossing petals with reckless enthusiasm and waving at everyone as she went. Pastor Judith smiled warmly when Bet reached the front. "Hunters and Bet," she began, "today you stand under the same tree where fear once lived. But today, fear has no place here." Bet squeezed Hunter's hand. Pastor Judith nodded for Hunters to begin. He inhaled deeply. "Bet, when I first met you, I was a man who lived by rules and caution. I thought control could protect me. But you showed me. Life isn't lived through fear, it's lived through connection, through truth. Through every morning I woke up and realized I didn't want a year. I wanted forever." Bet's eyes glistened. "I love you," Hunters said simply. "I love you for your strength, for your kindness, for the way you love Cassandra, for the way you taught me how to be a better man. I promise to stand with you, to grow with you, and to choose you every day." Bet exhaled, wiping a tear before it fell. Her turn. "Hunters, when you came into my life, everything felt uncertain. We were two people from different worlds. I didn't trust your heart, and I didn't trust mine. But you showed me that people can change, that love can grow in places we never expect. You fought for us when you didn't have to. You told the truth when it cost you, and you love Cassandra as if she is your own." Hunters blinked away tears. I promise to walk with you in faith, to build with you, to support you, and to cherish the home we're creating. I promise to love you, not because of an agreement, but because of who you've become. The choir hummed softly as the vows settled over the guests. Pastor Judith raised her hands. By the power given to me, and with joy overflowing, I now pronounce you husband and wife, truly. Hunters, you may kiss your bride. Hunters leaned in slowly, brushing his lips against Bet's in a tender, reverent kiss. Applause erupted around them. Cheers, claps, whistles, and joyful shouts filled the air. Cassandra danced in circles, shouting, "Mommy and Daddy forever!" Hunters lifted Bet's hand, kissing it gently before pulling Cassandra into their embrace. They were a family, fully, finally, beautifully. As the reception began, music played from the speakers, and tables filled with food lined the yard. People hugged the couple. Children ran around laughing. Hunters and Bet shared their first dance under the tree, swaying slowly while Cassandra clung to Hunter's leg, happily joining. Bet rested her head on his shoulder. "This feels right," she whispered. "It does," he replied, kissing her forehead. "And this is only the beginning." Bet looked around at the community, at her daughter laughing with friends, at the man holding her close. A new chapter was waiting, and she was ready. The morning after the real wedding carried a peace Bet hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The house was quiet in a soft, comforting way, the kind of silence that existed not because something was missing, but because everything was finally in its rightful place. Bet sat up slowly, the sunlight warming her arms where it streamed through the window. Her wedding ring glimmered faintly, a whisper of yesterday's joy. She turned to see Hunter still sleeping beside her, his hand resting near hers on the sheets, his breathing deep and even. Last night, after the reception ended, after the hugs and laughter and dancing under the oak tree, he had held her as if it were the first night they ever shared a bed, but this time without hesitation, without fear, without anything to hide. Bet leaned back against the headboard, holding the moment close. Cassandra had fallen asleep on Hunter's chest after dancing herself silly, and he had carried her inside, whispering, "We'll tuck her in together, as a family." Those words echoed in Bet's mind now. As she adjusted her pillow, the sound of little footsteps pattered down the hallway. A second later, their bedroom door swung open, and Cassandra stood there in her pajamas, her hair tousled and her eyes bright. "Mommy, Daddy," she whispered loudly, then ran over and crawled into bed between them. "We're married again today?" Bet laughed, pulling her daughter close. "Baby, weddings happen once, but love happens every day." Cassandra nodded seriously, as if processing important information. "Can we eat pancakes then?" Hunter stirred, groaning softly. "Pancakes," he mumbled, still half asleep. "I could do pancakes, maybe." Bet chuckled, shaking her head. "Let me handle breakfast. You two get yourselves together." But Hunter sat up, stretching. "No, today is your rest day. I'll cook," Cassandra gasped dramatically. "Daddy cooking?" "Mommy, he's really brave." Hunters pointed at her playfully. "Hey, I cooked before." Bet smiled warmly. "Yeah, baby, once. And we had to open all the windows for an hour." Cassandra giggled so hard she fell sideways on the pillows. Hunters grabbed his pillow and tossed it lightly onto Bet's lap. "Okay, fair, but let me try again." Bet nodded, amused. "Fine, but I'm supervising." In the kitchen, Hunters attempted pancakes while Bet chopped fruit. Cassandra sat on the counter swinging her legs, helping by handing ingredients one at a time. Hunters flipped one pancake with too much confidence and hit the side of the skillet. Bet snorted, covering her mouth. "I saw that," she teased. "No, you didn't," Hunters said. "Yes, I did," Cassandra chimed in. "It was a pancake fail." Hunters pressed a hand to his chest dramatically. "You're too honest for your own good." "Mommy says honesty is good," Cassandra replied proudly. Bet winked. "She's right." Hunters leaned across the counter, brushing Bet's hand with his fingers. "If today keeps going like this, I'm going to forget what my life looked like before." Bet exhaled softly. "That's the goal." After breakfast, Bet slipped away to her home office, a small room she had repurposed with bookshelves, a chalkboard wall, and a desk filled with colored pens and sticky notes. She opened her notebook, the same one she used when planning her real wedding, and turned to the section titled Esperanza Literacy for All. Proposal draft. Her dream, a community literacy project, wasn't new. She had thought about it for years, inspired by the children she saw struggling at the library, the adults who whispered to her in embarrassment that they never learned to read fluently, the teens who avoided books because no one had encouraged them. But she had always pushed the idea aside, overwhelmed by life's demands. A full-time job, bills, raising Cassandra alone. It hadn't seemed possible. Now something was different. She wasn't alone. Hunters knocked gently and stepped inside. "Working already?" Bet looked up, closing the notebook halfway. "I was just thinking about the project you mentioned last month," he asked, sitting across from her. She hesitated. "Yes. I just don't know if I can. It's big. It needs support, funding, space, volunteers. I don't want to start something and fail." Hunters leaned in, placing his hand over hers. "Bet, you've been leading our home with love and strength. You built community around us before you even realized it. If anyone can lead a literacy program, it's you." Her eyes softened. "You think so?" "I know so," she swallowed, touched deeply. "Then I'll do it. I'll start with the church, maybe use their annex on Saturdays." "I'll make sure you have whatever resources you need," Hunter said firmly. "Space, supplies, transportation, anything." Pat raised a brow. "Hunters, this is my project, not a one-star project." "I know," he replied. "I'm supporting my wife, not my employee, not my image." "You," Bet's lips curled upward. "Okay then, we'll build it together." 2 weeks later, Bet walked into the church annex for the first meeting of her literacy program, dressed in jeans and a soft yellow blouse, her hair in a loose bun. Children, teens, and adults sat at long tables, holding notebooks and pencils. The walls were decorated with posters featuring affirmations. You can grow. You can learn. You can thrive. Hunter stood by the door, handing out folders. He wasn't the cold CEO today. He was a supportive husband, quietly arranging supplies, setting up chairs, and answering questions from participants. Bet stepped onto the small stage area and took a deep breath. "Welcome," she began. "This program is not about perfection. It's about growth. It's about giving yourself permission to learn at your own pace." People nodded, listening closely. Cassandra sat in the front row and waved at her mother like she was watching a celebrity. Bet felt tears prick her eyes. After the first session, a woman approached her. "Bet, thank you. I needed this." Bet hugged her gently. "We're here for each other." Hunters watched nearby, his chest swelling with pride. "That night at home," he told her, "Esperanza just met the real Bet Anderson, and they're lucky they did." She blushed lightly. "Thank you for helping. Thank you for letting me," he replied. Word about BET's literacy project spread quickly, first through Esperanza, then through Houston's nonprofit circles. A local magazine published a piece titled, "CEO's Wife Builds Bridge Between Education and Community." Bet read the headline at the kitchen table, eyebrows raised. "I didn't know they were going to publish something." Hunters rubbed the back of his neck. "They reached out to me. I didn't want to say anything until I knew they would portray you respectfully." "They did. This is good," she said quietly. "Really good." Hunter smiled softly. "You carned it." Soon invitations arrived for Bet to attend educational panels, literacy forums, and charity events. Women who once looked at her cautiously now approached her with respect. At one gala in Houston, an older woman in a navy gown extended her hand. "Mrs. Anderson, your work is admirable. It's refreshing to see leadership grounded in compassion." Bet thanked her politely, and later leaned toward Hunters. "I still can't believe this is real," she whispered. Hunters took her hand. "Believe it." Their lives shifted gradually into a new rhythm. Mornings spent reading with Cassandra, afternoons planning literacy events, evenings filled with family dinners, weekends enjoying church, parks, and quiet porch moments. There was laughter, there were challenges, there were moments of exhaustion, but everything felt rooted in something solid, something earned. One night, Bet sat beside Hunters on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder. "You know what's strange?" she said. "You married me for your company's image, but now everything about our life, none of it feels like an image. It feels real." Hunters nodded slowly. "Because it is. The man who cared about image is gone. Bet looked up at him. What do you care about now? He kissed her forehead. Legacy. Not money, not reputation. Us. She smiled. Then let's build it, he whispered. We already are. By the end of the year, Bet's literacy project had grown. 2 full weekly classes, volunteers from Esperanza, support from educational leaders in Houston, a book drive sponsored by the church, and a children's reading festival scheduled for spring. Hunters became known not just as a CEO, but as a husband who supported his wife's passion. The community noticed his transformation. It was impossible to ignore. He no longer lived behind the shield of formality, nor did he keep people at arm's length. At dinner one night, Cassandra looked between her parents and said, "Mommy, Daddy, we're like a team." Bet smiled. "Yes, baby, we are." Cassandra giggled. "We're the Anderson team." Hunters laughed. "Yes, we are." Bet leaned back, watching the 2 people she loved most. This right here was the legacy she wanted. A legacy built not from contracts, not from fear, not from image, but from love. The months following the launch of BET's literacy program unfolded like carefully placed stepping stones, each moment building upon the last, shaping a life that neither Bet nor Hunters fully expected, but both cherished deeply. Their home, once a place of quiet uncertainty, now thrummed with a kind of peace that could only come from shared purpose. It was early spring in Texas, the sort of season where the mornings began crisp and the afternoons melted into warm breezes. Bet opened the kitchen window to let in the fresh air as she prepared breakfast. The sound of leaves rustling outside mixed with the bubbling of the kettle on the stove. Behind her, Cassandra sat at the table with a children's world map book. She pointed at different places with a crayon. "Mommy, where is New Orleans?" she asked. Bet turned, wiping her hands. "Right here, baby, see? Right by the water." Cassandra giggled. "We went there." Bet smiled. "We did." Trips had become part of their new life. Short ones, long ones, each carefully planned around BET's program and Hunter's work schedule, but always done with intention. They had visited New Orleans for music and food, Santa Fe for art and calm desert skies, and even Chicago for a weekend, where Hunters introduced Bet to one of his favorite jazz lounges. But traveling wasn't just about fun. It became a bridge for them, a way to blend their worlds, their traditions, their dreams. Hunters walked into the kitchen, tie loose and shirt sleeves rolled up. "I smell eggs," he said, leaning over Bet's shoulder. "And biscuits," she added. Cassandra raised her hand dramatically. "And honey." Bet laughed. "Yes, and honey." Hunters kissed Bet's forehead, then ruffled Cassandra's hair before taking a seat. Moments like this, simple and sweet, were the glue that held their growing family together. Later that week, the family took a road trip to Galveston. It wasn't far, but for Bet and Cassandra, the ocean always brought healing. The waves carried the kind of calm that invited deep breaths and long thoughts. Bet leaned against the railing of the pier, watching Cassandra chase seagulls across the sand. Hunters stood beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze soft as he watched their daughter play. "She's growing," he murmured. "Too fast." Bet sighed. Hunters glanced at Bet. "I want us to do this more often. Not just travel, but breathe like this. Together." Bet looked up at him. "I'd like that." Hunters slid his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Bet, I spent years thinking the only thing that mattered was building my company. I thought work defined me. But now, when I think of life, I think of this. You, her, us." Bet rested her head against him. "Work is still part of who you are. But now you're more than a title. You're hers." She nodded toward Cassandra. "And mine." Hunters kissed the top of her head. "I like who I'm becoming with you." They stayed like that, listening to waves crashing and Cassandra shouting, "Mommy, Daddy, look at my shell," as she ran toward them with treasure in her hands. Bet took it gently. "It's beautiful," Cassandra nodded proudly. "It's for our family jar." Hunters raised a brow. "Family jar?" Bet's smile widened. "She started it last week. Shells, ticket stubs, little memories. She puts them all in a jar so she can remember everything we do." Hunters knelt down. "That's a great idea, sweetheart." Cassandra beamed. "It's our life jar." Back in Esperanza, life returned to its regular rhythm. But the blending of their traditions, his, hers, and those they created together, became a quiet celebration of their love. On Sundays, Bet took Hunters and Cassandra to Mount Hope Baptist Church. Hunters no longer sat stiffly in the pews. He swayed slightly to the music, clapped on beat, even closed his eyes when the choir sang. He learned the importance of fellowship, of community, of being part of something larger than himself. After service, they often went to Rosa's Cafe, where Bet introduced him to fried catfish so crispy it practically melted in steam. Hunters became known for ordering extra cornbread and sweet tea he insisted he did not like, but drank anyway. Bet also embraced Hunter's world. She attended corporate dinners as his partner, not as an accessory, but as a woman respected for her own purpose. When she attended conferences with him, she stayed true to herself, wearing bright colors and speaking with warmth. Hunter's colleagues admired her effortlessly. One evening at a Houston charity gala, Bet and Hunters stood together near the center of the ballroom, as soft jazz played in the background. "You fit here," Hunters whispered. Bet chuckled lightly. "I fit everywhere you're willing to walk beside me." He brushed his thumb across her knuckles. "That goes both ways." Their worlds were no longer separate. They were woven into a shared life they built intentionally. Parenting Cassandra became one of the greatest joys of their marriage. Hunters learned to braid her hair, awkwardly at first, then with increasing confidence. Bet laughed every time he proudly showed her a crooked braid and asked, "Better than last time?" At night, Hunters read to her, often falling asleep before she did. Bet would peek into her room, smiling at the sight of her daughter tucked under one of his arms like a small puppy, and Cassandra attached herself to Hunters in ways that surprised them all. One afternoon, while Bet was preparing materials for the literacy class, Cassandra sat on the carpet drawing stick figures. She titled the page, "Family." There were 3 figures, Bet, Cassandra, and Hunters. When Bet approached, Cassandra tapped the tallest figure proudly. "Daddy." Bet knelt beside her, brushing her daughter's cheek. "You love him, don't you?" Cassandra nodded. "He loves me too." Bet smiled, a quiet warmth filling her chest. "He does." Hunters walked in moments later, and Cassandra ran to show him the drawing. He froze, staring at the picture before kneeling and hugging Cassandra tightly. "I love you so much," he whispered. Bet watched from the doorway, feeling her heart expand again. They grew not through dramatic events, but through shared dinners, slow conversations on the porch, long drives with the music low, quiet evenings after Cassandra fell asleep, small acts of kindness. One night, Bet found Hunters working late in his office, the lamp dim, papers scattered. She walked in quietly and placed a cup of warm tea beside him. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted. "Thank you." Bet sat on the edge of the desk. "You're pushing too hard again." He rubbed his eyes. "I'm trying to balance everything. Work, your project, family." Bet took his hand. "We balance it together. You're not carrying this alone." He exhaled and pulled Bet into his arms. "You steady me." She rested against him. "We steady each other." Hunters kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of us." "So am I," she whispered. One of their deepest conversations happened late one night, long after Cassandra had fallen asleep. They sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a light blanket as the crickets chirped. Bet turned to Hunters, her voice low. "Can I ask you something? Anything? When did you know that this wasn't about the contract anymore?" Hunters thought for a long moment. "The night you packed your bags. When I realized losing you felt like losing the one piece of my life that made sense." Bet looked at him softly. "Fear used to rule everything about you." "I know," he admitted. "But you taught me how to feel without running away." Bet brushed her thumb across his hand. "And you taught me how to trust again." Hunters pulled her close. "Bet, I want us to build a life where Cassandra grows up seeing what love looks like. Not fear, not caution, just love." Bet nodded, tears forming gently. "We're already building that," he whispered. "You saved me." "No," she said quietly. "We saved each other." They sat in silence, wrapped in the comfort of their healing. The life they built wasn't perfect, but it was whole. BT continued her literacy project, expanding it with new programs. Hunters started volunteering occasionally, helping with fundraising and offering quiet support in the back of the room. Cassandra thrived, her confidence blooming, her laughter filling every corner of the home. Their travels continued, their traditions deepened, their bonds solidified. Each day felt like a step toward the legacy they were creating, One built on faith, growth, partnership, and love. A life they never planned. A life they never expected. A life they chose, together. Sunday morning sunlight filtered through the thin white curtains in the living room, casting a warm glow across the wooden floor of the Anderson home. It was the kind of morning that felt like a quiet blessing, soft, easy, untouched by hurry. Bet stood at the hallway mirror, gently adjusting the white pearl earrings she wore every Sunday. Cassandra sat on the edge of the couch, swinging her legs while humming a gospel tune she'd learned at Mount Hope Baptist Church. Hunters stood near the window, tying his shoelaces, watching the neighborhood slowly come alive. A few neighbors waved as they walked their dogs or loaded kids into minivans for church. The world was moving gently, and for the first time in his life, Hunters felt completely in rhythm with it. Life had changed. The man who once measured days by spreadsheets and quarterly reports now measured them by moments. Cassandra's drawings, Bet's laughter, the smell of breakfast drifting through the house, the quiet peace of evenings spent on the porch swing. The shift was slow at first, then powerful, and now it was undeniable. "Daddy, can you help me with my bow?" Cassandra asked, standing up with her arms raised. Hunters walked over, smiling as he knelt to tie the pink bow in her curls. "All right, turn around." He tied it carefully, smoothing the ends so they rested perfectly against her dress. Cassandra giggled. "Mommy says you're getting better at this." Bet stepped over from the hallway, smiling softly. "He really is." Hunters rose, placing a gentle kiss on BT's forehead. "I've had good teachers." This was the life they built, one filled with affection, growth, and tenderness that hadn't been part of any deal, but grew naturally between them. A life that deepened every day. The drive to Esperanza was peaceful. The small Texas town was shimmering in early sunlight. Storefronts downtown were opening, bakeries pulling open doors, a cafe putting out metal chairs, a group of older men already gathered near the barber shop, sipping coffee and trading stories. Bet drove with one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting lightly on Hunter's knee. He placed his own hand over hers. "I love mornings like this," Bet said. "They feel steady. They feel like home," Hunters added. Bet looked at him. "You really mean that now?" He nodded. "My life never felt grounded before you two. This town, this rhythm, you made it home for me." Cassandra leaned forward between their seats. "Mommy, Daddy, can we get donuts after church?" Bet laughed. "Maybe." "Not maybe," Hunter said. "Definitely." Cassandra cheered, then sat back, satisfied. As they approached the church, the parking lot was already bustling. Families dressed in their Sunday best greeted each other with hugs and cheerful good mornings. Hunter stepped out first, then moved to help Cassandra out. Bet joined them, taking Cassandra's hand as they walked toward the entrance. People smiled warmly at them. A few older church members nodded with approval, especially at the sight of Hunters holding his daughter's hand with genuine affection. "Morning, Bet," someone called. "Morning," she responded, waving. Hunters received handshakes he once found awkward but now embraced with sincerity. They had become part of the fabric of Esperanza, not as an arrangement, not as a performance, but as a family woven into the community by choice and love. The service began with the usual praise songs, voices rising, instruments blending, children clapping along. Hunters wasn't much for singing, but he stood with an arm around Bet's waist, occasionally leaning down to whisper something that made her chuckle softly. Cassandra stayed close to them, singing loudly even when her pitch wandered. When Pastor Harris stepped up to give his message, the room settled into focused quiet. "Family," he said, "isn't always defined by how it starts. Sometimes it's defined by who stays and who grows with you." Bet and Hunters exchanged a look. The pastor continued, "A contract can start a commitment, but only the heart can sustain it. What matters is the work two people put in. What matters is the courage to love, even when it's easier to run." Hunters felt the words sink into him. He took Bet's hand, squeezing it gently. She squeezed back. It felt as though the message was written specifically for them. After church, instead of heading straight to the car, they decided to walk through the center of town. Cassandra skipped ahead of them, waving at friends as they passed. Hunter slid his hand into Bet's. "I want to talk to you," he said. Bet looked up at him. "Everything okay?" He nodded slowly. "Better than okay. I just..." Want to finally say this the right way. Bet stopped walking, turning fully toward him. The late morning breeze lifted the edge of her dress, sunlight reflecting in her eyes. Hunters took both her hands. I married you because of an agreement, because I thought my career required it. I thought logic was enough to build a life on. He took a steadying breath. But I was wrong. Love wasn't part of the deal, but it became the part I can't live without. Bet's eyes softened. He continued, voice low and full. I spent years telling myself emotions made me weak. Then I met you, and you showed me that real strength is loving someone enough to change. Bet felt tears forming but didn't look away. Hunters placed a hand over his chest. Bet. My heart broke the contract long before I realized it. Her breath caught. He stepped closer. And I don't ever want to go back to the man I was before you. Bet held his face gently in her hands. You're not that man anymore. Her voice trembled with emotion. You chose us. You fought for us. You let yourself feel. That's the man I love. Hunters leaned his forehead against hers. I love you, Bet. She smiled softly. I love you too. Cassandra ran back to them, wrapping her arms around both their legs. Group hug. They laughed, scooping her up between them. The three of them stood in the middle of Esperanza's main street, holding each other tightly, as though sealing their future right there in front of the town that witnessed the beginning of their unlikely journey. As afternoon stretched in, they drove back to their home, cooked lunch together, and spent hours lounging in the backyard. Cassandra played with chalk on the patio, drawing pictures of their family. Later, Bet and Hunters sat on the porch swing, the same place where so many important moments had unfolded between them. Fear, doubt, closeness, confession. Bet leaned into him. Do you ever think about how we started? All the time, Hunters replied. Bet smiled. Wild, isn't it? A contract, a decision made out of pressure, a marriage that shouldn't have been anything more. Hunters chuckled lightly. That's the story the world thinks they know. But they don't know this. He brushed her cheek with his fingers. They don't know what we built. Bet placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of the heart that once guarded itself too tightly. We didn't choose love at the start, she said quietly. Love chose us along the way. Hunters nodded. And thank God it did. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Esperanza's quiet evening sounds floated through the air. Neighbors grilling, children playing, someone mowing a lawn in the distance. This was their world, their family, their peace. Thank you for journeying with BET, Hunters and Cassandra. If this story touched you, if it moved you, if it reminded you of the power of choosing love even when it wasn't part of the plan, please like this video, comment, and subscribe to Stories by Mr. Flex. Your support helps us reach more hearts with stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of what truly matters.